The night they sold her to the devil, Celine Vale stood in a wedding dress that wasn't hers, holding flowers meant for another woman's hands. Her stepmother's final words still burned in her ears. He'll never know the difference. But when Adrian Voss turned his cold gray eyes on her at the altar, she realized Miranda had made a fatal mistake. He knew exactly who she was, and he was smiling. If you want to see how a discarded daughter becomes a queen and destroys the family that tried to bury her, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story reaches. Let's begin. Well, the estate smelled like funeral flowers and unpaid bills. Celine stood at the kitchen sink, her hands raw from scrubbing the same cast iron pan for the third time that week. The water ran cold because Miranda had forgotten to pay the gas bill again, though there'd been plenty of money for Celeste's new handbag, the one currently sitting on the marble counter, still wrapped in tissue paper, price tag dangling like a middle finger. "Celine, where's my coffee?" Miranda's voice cut through the morning silence like nails on glass. Celine didn't flinch. She'd stopped flinching 2 years ago, right around the time she'd stopped expecting things to get better. "Coming?" she called back, her voice flat. She dried her hands on a towel that used to be white, poured the coffee into the china cup Miranda insisted on using, one of the few pieces from her father's collection that hadn't been sold yet, and carried it into the dining room. Miranda sat at the head of the table, the seat that had been Celine's father's. She'd moved into it the day after the funeral, and she'd never left. Her blonde hair was perfectly curled, her makeup flawless even at 7 in the morning. She looked like the kind of woman who'd never scrubbed a pan in her life. She probably hadn't. "It's cold," Miranda said without tasting it. "It's not." "Don't talk back to me." Miranda's eyes were ice blue and sharp. "Make another one." Celine set the cup down carefully. "I just made it 30 seconds ago. It's hot." "Are you arguing with me?" "I'm stating a fact." Miranda's hand cracked across Celine's cheek before she saw it coming. The sound echoed in the cavernous dining room, loud enough that Celeste looked up from her phone at the other end of the table. "Wow," Celeste said mildly. "Before breakfast. That's a record." Celine's face burned, but she didn't raise her hand to touch it. She wouldn't give Miranda the satisfaction. "Get out of my sight," Miranda said, "and take this with you." She shoved the coffee cup toward the edge of the table. It tipped, spilling dark liquid across the white tablecloth. Celine picked up the cup and walked back to the kitchen. Her reflection caught in the window over the sink, dark hair pulled back in a braid that was coming loose, gray eyes that used to be bright, a face that looked older than 24. She looked like someone who'd forgotten how to expect kindness. She dumped the coffee down the sink and started making another pot. Behind her, she heard Celeste's laugh, high and careless. "Mom, you're going to break her one of these days." "She's already broken," Miranda said. "That's why she's still here." Celine's hand stilled on the coffee filter. No, that wasn't why she was still here. She was still here because this house, this crumbling, debt-ridden estate, had been her father's. Because every room held memories of him teaching her to read in his study, dancing with her in the ballroom, telling her she was smart and capable and destined for something better than this. She was still here because leaving would mean admitting he was really gone, that everything he'd built had been torn apart by the woman he'd married in a moment of loneliness. She was still here because she was a damn fool. The doorbell rang. Celine heard Miranda's chair scrape back. "Get that, Celeste." "I'm eating." "You're scrolling through Instagram. Get the door." Celeste sighed dramatically, but got up. Celine heard her heels clicking across the marble floor, heard the front door open. Then she heard Celeste's voice change. The boredom dropped out of it, replaced by something sharp and nervous. Can I help you?" "We're here to see Miranda Bennett." A man's voice, deep and professional. "She's—" "Hold on." Footsteps. Celeste's heels moving faster. "Mom, there are men at the door." "What kind of men?" "The kind with briefcases." Silence. Then Miranda's voice, tight and controlled. "Show them to the sitting room." Celine dried her hands and moved to the kitchen doorway. She could see through to the front hall, where 2 men in dark suits stood waiting. One of them carried a leather portfolio. The other had the kind of face that suggested he'd seen worse things than unpaid debts. Miranda swept into the room, her smile bright and practiced. "Gentlemen, what can I do for you?" The man with the portfolio didn't smile back. "Mrs. Bennett, We're here representing the consolidated creditors of the Bennett estate. I believe you've been avoiding our calls." Miranda's smile didn't falter. "I've been terribly busy, you understand? We need to discuss payment arrangements. The estate owes a sum of $2,400,000. The grace period ended 3 months ago." The number hit the room like a stone through glass. Celeste made a small sound. Miranda's smile finally cracked. There must be some mistake." "No mistake." The man opened his portfolio and removed a stack of papers. "Credit lines, personal loans, outstanding invoices, your late husband's debts, which you assumed upon his death, and your own purchases since then." He glanced at Celeste, at the handbag on the counter behind her. "Quite a few of your own purchases?" Miranda's face had gone pale beneath her makeup. "I need time." "You've had time, 2 years of it." The man set the papers on the side table. "We're prepared to be reasonable, but we need collateral, assets, something of value." Miranda looked around the room as if seeing it for the first time. The paintings were gone, the sculptures, the antique furniture. She'd sold everything that wasn't nailed down, and some things that were. "The house is mortgaged beyond its value. We'd barely cover half the debt if we liquidated it." The man folded his hands. "We need something else." "I don't have anything else." The second man spoke for the first time. His voice was quieter, but somehow worse. "We're aware that Adrian Voss has expressed interest in a marriage arrangement." The room went still. Celine's hands tightened on the doorframe. Everyone in the city knew about Adrian Voss, the crime king who controlled half the underground and most of the legitimate businesses too. The man who'd built an empire from nothing and crushed anyone who stood in his way. The man who'd been in a car accident 5 years ago and hadn't walked since. The man everyone feared and no one touched. Miranda's voice came out strangled. That was a business discussion. Mr. Voss is prepared to absolve the entire debt in exchange for a bride. The quiet man's eyes were flat. "One of the Bennett daughters. The wedding is scheduled for this weekend." "No." The word ripped out of Celeste. "Absolutely not. I'm not marrying that cripple." "Celeste!" Miranda's voice cracked like a whip. "I won't do it!" Celeste's face was red, her voice climbing toward hysteria. "Everyone knows he's a monster. They say he killed his own brother. They say he can't even—" She stopped, but the implication hung in the air. Miranda grabbed her daughter's arm. "Lower your voice. I don't care. I'm not doing it." Celeste jerked away. "Make Celine do it. She's your stepdaughter. She counts." 3 pairs of eyes turned toward the kitchen doorway. Celine stepped back, but it was too late. They'd seen her. The man with the portfolio tilted his head. "You have another daughter?" "Stepdaughter," Miranda said quickly. "From my husband's first marriage. We don't consider her part of the family business." "Does she live here?" "She works here." "Then she's a Bennett." The man made a note on his papers. "Either daughter is acceptable. Mr. Voss left the choice to you." Celeste was already shaking her head. No, I have a life. I have plans. Marcus and I are going to—" She stopped again, her hand flying to her mouth. Miranda's eyes narrowed. "Marcus? Who the hell is Marcus?" "No one. Forget it." "Celeste Ann Bennett. Who is Marcus?" But Celeste was already backing toward the stairs, her face crumpling. "I can't marry Adrian Voss. I can't. I'm sorry, Mom, but I can't." She turned and ran. Miranda started after her, then stopped. Turned back to the men. "Give me a week. I'll talk to her. I'll make her understand." "You have until Friday," the quiet man said. "The ceremony is Saturday evening. If no one shows up, we begin liquidation proceedings Monday morning." He glanced at Celine. "One Bennett woman at the altar. That's all Mr. Voss requires." They left. The house was silent except for Celeste's muffled crying from upstairs. Miranda stood in the center of the sitting room, her hands clenched into fists, her breathing sharp and shallow. When she finally turned to look at Celine, her eyes were wild. "This is your fault," she said. Celine blinked. "My fault? If your father hadn't left everything in such a mess, if you'd been useful for once in your pathetic life." Miranda crossed the room in 3 strides. "You heard them. One Bennett woman. Well, you're a Bennett, aren't you? At least legally." The implication settled over Celine like freezing water. "No," she said. "You don't get to say no." I'm not marrying Adrian Voss. Then we lose everything. Miranda's voice ricocheted off the walls. The house, the money, everything your father built, all of it gone. Is that what you want? To destroy his legacy completely? You already did that. The words came out cold and hard. You and Celeste, you've been bleeding this estate dry since the day he died. Miranda's hand rose again, but this time Celine caught her wrist. Don't, Celine said quietly. For a moment they stood frozen. Then Miranda jerked her arm away, breathing hard. You'll do this, she said, or I'll throw you out with nothing. Not a dollar, not a reference. You'll have nowhere to go and no way to survive. I'll take my chances. Will you? Miranda's smile was vicious. You've been hiding in this house for 2 years, scrubbing floors and pretending you're staying for your father's memory. But we both know the truth, don't we? You're staying because you're afraid. You have no skills, no prospects, nothing. Without this house, you're nothing. The words hit harder than the slap had, because part of them was true. Celine had let herself become small. She'd let Miranda grind her down, day after day, until she'd almost forgotten who she used to be. The girl who'd read philosophy and economics in her father's study. The girl who'd planned to start her own business, travel the world, build something that mattered. That girl had disappeared into the walls of this house. But she wasn't completely gone. No, Celine said again. Miranda's face twisted. Then get out. Fine. Celine walked back to the kitchen, untied her apron, and dropped it on the counter. She walked upstairs to the small room they'd given her, the room that used to be for storage, and pulled out the duffel bag she'd kept packed under the bed for exactly this moment. She was halfway down the stairs when Celeste appeared at the landing above her. You're really leaving? Celeste's voice was small. Celine didn't stop. Yes. What about... Celeste hesitated. What about the wedding? Not my problem. Mom's going to lose everything. Celine reached the bottom of the stairs and turned. Celeste stood at the railing, looking younger than 21, her perfect makeup streaked with tears. You're both going to lose everything, Celine said, because you spent the last 2 years treating this estate like a bank account and me like a servant. You made your choices. Now live with them. She walked out the front door and didn't look back. The city was cold for April. Celine walked 6 blocks before she realized she had nowhere to go. No friends left. She'd lost touch with all of them after her father died. No extended family. Her mother's side had cut ties when she was 10. No savings. Miranda had made sure of that. She sat down on a bench in a small park, her duffel bag at her feet, and stared at the fountain in front of her. The water was off. The fountain had been broken for years. Behind her, footsteps. Celine Bennett? She turned. A woman in a black suit stood there, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked like she'd stepped out of a corporate boardroom. Who's asking? Celine said. My name is Diana Roth. I work for Adrian Voss. The woman's expression was unreadable. He'd like to speak with you. Celine's stomach dropped. How did you? We've had people watching your house since the creditors made contact. Mr. Voss likes to know who he's dealing with. Diana gestured to a black car idling at the curb. Please, he doesn't like to be kept waiting. I'm not interested in marrying him. Then tell him yourself. Celine looked at the car, then at her duffel bag, then at the broken fountain. She had nothing to lose. She stood up and followed Diana to the car. The drive took 20 minutes. They left the tree-lined streets of her old neighborhood and moved deeper into the city, toward the glass towers of the financial district. The car pulled into an underground garage beneath one of the tallest buildings, and Diana led her to a private elevator. They rode up in silence. The doors opened onto a penthouse that looked like it had been designed by someone who understood power. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city. The furniture was sleek and modern, all clean lines and dark wood. Everything was immaculate, and in the center of the room, in a wheelchair, sat Adrian Voss. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 35, with dark hair swept back from a face that was all sharp angles and controlled intensity. His eyes were gray, the kind of gray that looked silver in certain light. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than her father's estate had been worth. He was looking at her like he already knew every secret she'd ever kept. Miss Bennett, he said. His voice was smooth and deep, with just enough edge to remind her he was dangerous. Thank you for coming. Selene set her duffel bag down. I didn't have much choice. You had every choice. You could have refused Diana. You could have run. But you're here. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit. I'd rather stand. Suit yourself. He leaned back, his hands folded in his lap. I assume you know why I asked to meet you. You want to buy a wife. His mouth curved slightly. I want to settle a debt. The wife is incidental. Then pick Celeste. She's the one they promised you. I don't want Celeste. His eyes never left her face. I want you. The words hung in the air between them. Celine's pulse was hammering, but she kept her voice steady. Why? Because I've been watching you for 6 months. The floor seemed to tilt. I've seen how they treat you, Adrian continued. Your stepmother and her daughter. I've seen you scrubbing floors in a house that should have been yours. I've seen you take every insult, every slap, every humiliation, and keep going. You want to know why I want you instead of Celeste? He leaned forward slightly. Because you're stronger than they'll ever be. Because you've survived 2 years of hell, and you're still standing. Because when I look at you, I don't see a victim. I see someone who's been waiting for a chance to burn it all down. Celine's throat was tight. You don't know me. I know enough. He paused. The wedding is in 4 days. Marry me, and I'll clear the debt. Your stepmother keeps the house, Celeste keeps her lifestyle, and you... He smiled, and it wasn't kind. You get out. What do you get? A wife who understands that this is a transaction. No illusions, no romance, no expectations beyond what we agree to. His eyes glittered. And someone I can trust not to stick a knife in my back the first chance she gets. You don't trust anyone. No, he agreed, but I trust self-interest. And right now, our interests align. Celine crossed her arms. What happens after the wedding? You live here. You attend events with me when necessary. You play the role of Mrs. Voss for the public. He tilted his head. In private, you have your own wing of the penthouse, your own life. I won't touch you unless you want me to. And if I say no, then you walk out that door with your duffel bag and take your chances on the street. Miranda and Celeste lose everything. The creditors liquidate the estate. He shrugged. I find another way to make my point. What point? That I always get what I want. Celine stared at him. At this man everyone called broken, sitting in a wheelchair with the kind of quiet power that filled the entire room. At the city spread out behind him like a kingdom he owned. She thought about Miranda's face, about Celeste's tears, about 2 years of scrubbing floors and swallowing rage. She thought about the girl she used to be, and the woman she could become if she stopped being afraid. I want something in return, she said. Adrian's eyebrows rose. Besides freedom from your stepfamily, I want access to the estate's financial records. Everything Miranda's done since my father died. Every purchase, every loan, every dollar she's spent. Planning to sue her? Planning to understand exactly how deep the hole goes. He studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. A real smile this time, sharp and approving. Done, he said. Anything else? Yes. Celine stepped closer. If I do this, if I marry you, I want the truth. Who you really are. What you really want. No more games. Adrian was quiet. Then he reached down and gripped the arms of his wheelchair. And he stood up. Celine's breath caught. He rose to his full height, easily 6 feet, and took a step toward her, then another. His movements were smooth, controlled, completely natural. He walked like someone who'd never spent a day in that chair, because he hadn't. I've been letting them think I'm weak, he said, stopping a few feet away. The accident was real. The recovery was not. I could walk 3 months after it happened, but everyone expects a cripple, so I give them one. It makes them careless. It makes them underestimate me. He looked down at her, and for the first time she saw the real man beneath the performance. That's who I am, he said. A liar, a manipulator, someone who will use every advantage, every deception, every weakness to get what I want. And what I want, he paused. What I want is an empire that no one can touch, and a wife who understands that power isn't given. It's taken. Celine's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Why me? She asked again. Really? Because when I watched you in that house, I saw someone who'd been beaten down but never broken. Someone who kept her dignity even when they tried to strip it away. Someone who deserved better than scrubbing floors for people who didn't deserve to breathe the same air. His eyes were intense. And because when I imagine the woman standing beside me when I take this city apart and rebuild it, I don't see Celeste. I see you. The room was silent except for the hum of the city beyond the windows. Celine thought about Miranda's hand across her face, about Celeste's careless cruelty, about 2 years of being invisible in her own home. She thought about her father telling her she was destined for better, and she thought about the man standing in front of her, offering her a chance to become someone who couldn't be pushed around anymore. "Okay," she said. Adrian's smile was slow and dangerous. "Okay. I'll marry you." He extended his hand, she took it. His grip was firm, warm, exactly as strong as it needed to be. 4 days, he said. "Saturday evening, I'll send Diana to collect you Friday night. Bring whatever you want from the house. It's the last time you'll have to set foot in there as anything less than my wife." He released her hand and stepped back, settling into the wheelchair with practiced ease. The performance was back in place. "One more thing," Celine said. He looked up. "Yes? When this is over, when we've settled the debt and played our parts, what happens to them? Miranda and Celeste." Adrian's smile turned cold. "What do you want to happen to them?" Celine thought about it. "I want them to see what they threw away," she said quietly. "I want them to realize they had a chance to treat me like family, and they chose cruelty instead. I want them to watch me become everything they said I'd never be. Consider it done." Diana appeared from a side door to escort Celine back downstairs. But at the elevator, Celine turned back. Adrian was still in the wheelchair, his hands folded, his eyes on the windows. "Mr. Voss," she said. He looked at her. "Thank you," she said, "for seeing me when no one else did." Something shifted in his expression, something almost human. "Call me Adrian," he said. "And don't thank me yet. You haven't seen what comes next." The elevator doors closed. Celine rode down in silence, Diana beside her. When they reached the lobby, Diana handed her a black credit card. "For anything you need before the wedding, clothes, personal items, whatever, no limit." Celine stared at the card. "I can't. You're about to become Adrian Voss's wife. You'll need to look the part." Diana's expression softened slightly. "He doesn't make offers like this lightly. Whatever you think you're getting into, it's bigger than you realize." "Is that a warning?" "It's a fact." Diana opened the car door. "Where can I take you?" Celine thought about the duffel bag, the broken fountain, the house that wasn't home anymore. "A hotel," she said. "Somewhere clean." Diana nodded and gave the driver an address. As the car pulled away from the tower, Celine looked back at the building rising into the sky. Somewhere up there, Adrian Voss was probably already planning his next move, already thinking 3 steps ahead. And in 4 days, she'd be standing beside him. She didn't know if she'd made the right choice, but for the first time in 2 years, she'd made a choice that was entirely her own, and that felt like power. The hotel Diana dropped her at wasn't just clean, it was the kind of place Celine had only seen in magazines. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, staff who moved like ghosts and anticipated needs before you voiced them. The woman at the front desk didn't even blink when Celine arrived, with nothing but a duffel bag and a black credit card that had no name on it. "Miss Bennett," she said, as if Celine had a reservation, as if this had all been arranged. "Your suite is ready." Of course it was. The room, suite, really, occupied an entire corner of the 18th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the river on one side and the city on the other. The bed was larger than her entire storage room back at the estate. There was a bathroom with a tub deep enough to drown in and a shower that had more settings than her father's old car. Celine dropped her duffel bag on the pristine white comforter and sat down beside it. The silence was enormous. She'd spent 2 years surrounded by Miranda's sharp voice and Celeste's constant complaints, and the general noise of a house slowly eating itself from the inside. Now, in this perfect quiet, she could hear her own thoughts again. And they were loud. What the hell had she just agreed to? Marriage to a man she'd met once, a man who'd lied to the entire city about being disabled, a man whose reputation was built on fear and whose empire was built on things she probably didn't want to know about, a man who'd looked at her like he saw someone worth saving. Celine pressed her palms against her eyes. Her father had been a good man, honest, kind, principled to a fault. He'd built his fortune slowly, carefully, never cutting corners or stepping on people to get ahead. And where had it gotten him? Dead at 52 from a heart attack brought on by stress, leaving everything to a wife who'd married him for his money, and a daughter too grief-stricken to fight back. Maybe being good wasn't enough. Maybe Adrienne Voss had the right idea. She stood up, crossed to the window, and looked out at the city spreading below her like a game board. Somewhere out there, Miranda was probably tearing the house apart looking for her. Celeste was probably crying to whatever boyfriend she'd been hiding. And Adrian was sitting in his tower, playing chess with people who didn't even know they were pieces. In 4 days, she'd be one of those pieces too, unless she made herself something more. Celine picked up the phone beside the bed and dialed the front desk. "Yes, Miss Bennett? I need a laptop and coffee, a lot of coffee." "Right away." 20 minutes later, she was sitting cross-legged on the bed with a brand new laptop open in front of her and a pot of coffee that could fuel a small army. She pulled up search engines and started digging. Adrienne Voss had told her to ask for the estate's financial records, but she didn't need to wait for those. She could start with what was public. She found her father's obituary first. It hurt more than she'd expected, seeing his face smiling out from the screen, seeing the sanitized version of his life that Miranda had probably written herself. Beloved husband, devoted father, pillar of the community. Nothing about how he'd worked himself to death trying to keep the business afloat after Miranda's spending started. Nothing about how he died alone in his study while his wife was at a spa weekend. Celine closed that tab and kept digging. She found the marriage license. Miranda Vale, née Ashford, married to Richard Bennett 3 years before his death. Celine pulled up everything she could find on Miranda Ashford and hit a wall almost immediately. No employment history, no previous marriages, no family that she could trace. It was like Miranda had appeared fully formed at a charity gala where she'd met Celine's father, all blonde hair and perfect smile, and just enough vulnerability to make a lonely widower feel like a hero. Celeste's history was easier to track. Born 21 years ago, father listed as unknown. Raised by Miranda as a single mother until Richard Bennett had provided the stability they both needed, or the bank account they both wanted. Celine kept searching, following threads that went nowhere, until she found something that made her sit up straighter. A property deed, a house in Miranda's name purchased 8 months before she'd met Richard Bennett. Purchased for cash, $300,000. Where the hell had a single mother with no job history gotten $300,000? Celine made a note and kept going. She pulled up the estate's business records next, the ones that were filed publicly. Her father's company, Bennett Industries, a mid-sized manufacturing firm that had been in the family for 2 generations, had been profitable until about 6 months before his death. Then the numbers started to shift. Accounts receivable went up, cash reserves went down. New loans appeared on the books, and all of it had happened after Miranda became a signatory on the business accounts. Celine's coffee had gone cold by the time she sat back, her eyes burning from the screen. Miranda hadn't just been bleeding the estate dry after Richard's death. She'd been doing it before. Slowly, carefully, positioning herself to take everything the moment he was gone. And Celine had been too buried in grief to see it. She closed the laptop and stared at the ceiling. 4 days until the wedding. 4 days to figure out if marrying Adrienne Voss was a terrible mistake or the smartest thing she'd ever done. 4 days to decide who she was going to be when she walked down that aisle. Her phone buzzed, a text from a number she didn't recognize. Diana Roth. Adrienne asked me to check in. Do you need anything? Celine stared at the message. Then she typed back, I need to see the estate's private financial records. Everything since my father married Miranda. The response came 30 seconds later. I'll have them sent to your room within the hour. Celine set the phone down and smiled. Maybe she was already learning to be a piece that moved herself. The records arrived in a banker's box carried by a man in a suit who didn't make eye contact. Celine signed for them and spent the next 6 hours going through every page. By midnight, she understood exactly how deep the betrayal went. Miranda hadn't just spent recklessly. She'd been systematic, strategic. She'd opened credit lines in the company's name and funneled the money into personal accounts. She'd approved contracts with vendors who didn't exist and pocketed the payments. She'd even managed to get herself named as the beneficiary on Richard's life insurance policy, A policy worth $2 million that should have gone to Celine. $2 million that had disappeared into Miranda's accounts within a month of Richard's death. Celine sat back, her hands shaking. Her father had been murdered by paperwork and stress, and a wife who'd seen him as a resource to extract. And Celine had let it happen because she'd been too broken to fight. Not anymore. She picked up her phone and called the number Diana had texted from. "Miss Bennett?" Diana's voice was crisp despite the late hour. "I need to see Adrian. It's nearly 1 in the morning." "I don't care." A pause. Then, "I'll send a car." The penthouse looked different at night. The city lights turned the windows into mirrors, reflecting back Celine's own pale face and dark eyes. Adrian was waiting in the same spot she'd left him, still in the wheelchair, still dressed like he'd just stepped out of a boardroom. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. Celine set the banker's box down on the table between them. "My stepmother stole $2 million from my father's life insurance. She embezzled from the company. She forged documents and opened fraudulent accounts and systematically dismantled everything he built. And she did it while he was still alive." Adrian leaned forward slightly. "You have proof? Every transaction, every forged signature, every fake vendor invoice." Celine's voice was steady, but her hands were clenched into fists. "She killed him. Maybe not with her own hands, but she killed him just the same." "And what do you want to do about it?" The question hung in the air. Celine thought about Miranda's ice-blue eyes, about Celeste's careless laugh, about 2 years of swallowing rage and scrubbing floors and pretending she was fine. "I want to destroy her," she said quietly. "I want to take everything she stole and everything she thinks she's going to keep, and I want to burn it all down in front of her. I want her to feel what my father felt, what I felt." Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, that same smooth, controlled movement, and walked to the windows. "There are 2 ways to destroy someone like Miranda," he said, his back to Celine. "The first is fast. I make a phone call. The authorities show up tomorrow. She's arrested for fraud and embezzlement. She goes to prison. It's over. And the second way?" He turned. The city lights behind him made his face half shadow. "The second way is slow. We let her think she's won. We let her believe that Celeste escaped the marriage and you took her place and everything worked out exactly as she planned. We let her keep the house, keep her lifestyle, keep thinking she's untouchable." His smile was cold. "And then piece by piece, we take it all away. We let her watch as the truth comes out, as her friends abandon her, as Celeste realizes what kind of mother she has, as every door she thought was open slams shut in her face." "That's crueler," Celine said. "Yes." "Good." She met his eyes. "I want the second way." Adrian crossed the room until he was standing directly in front of her. "You're sure? Once we start this, there's no going back. Miranda will know you're behind it. She'll hate you for the rest of her life." "She already hates me." Celine's voice didn't waver. "At least this way she'll have a reason." He studied her face for a long moment, then he nodded. "We'll start after the wedding," he said. "For now, let her think she's safe. Let her think the marriage solved all her problems. It'll make the fall so much worse." "What about Celeste?" "What about her?" Celine hesitated. "She's not like Miranda. She's spoiled and selfish, but she's not. She didn't know about the embezzlement. She's just a kid who's never been told no." "She's 21, Adrian said flatly. "And she spent 2 years watching her mother abuse you and did nothing. Don't make excuses for her." "I'm not making excuses. I'm saying she's a different problem." Celine crossed her arms. "Miranda deserves everything that's coming to her. But Celeste, I think she might actually change if someone made her." "You want to save her?" "I want to give her one chance to save herself. If she wastes it, then she can burn with Miranda." Adrian looked at her with something that might have been respect. "You're more ruthless than I thought." "I'm learning." He smiled. "Good. You'll need it." He moved back to his wheelchair and settled into it with practiced ease. "The wedding is Saturday at 6. Small ceremony, just witnesses and the officiant. I've already arranged everything." "What do I need to do?" "Show up. Say the words. Try not to look like you're being led to your execution." He tilted his head. "Can you manage that?" "I think so." "Diana will bring you a dress tomorrow. She'll also bring you up to speed on the basics, how to handle the press, who the major players are in my organization, what's expected of you at public events. You'll need to be ready to perform. The word made Celine's stomach twist. Perform. We're putting on a show, Celine, the crippled crime king and his beautiful new wife. The city will eat it up. They'll write stories about how you saved me, how love conquers all that sentimental garbage. His eyes were hard. Let them. The more they underestimate us, the easier it is to move. Is that what you've been doing? Letting them underestimate you? For 5 years. He gestured to the wheelchair. Everyone thinks I'm weak, broken. They offer me deals they wouldn't offer someone they feared. They let things slip in my presence because they assume I'm not a threat. And then I use everything they give me to put a knife in their back. That's why you can walk, Celine said slowly. That's why you've been hiding it. That's why. He leaned back. And you're one of 3 people who know the truth. Diana, myself, and now you. Why tell me? Because if we're going to do this, if we're going to take apart Miranda and rebuild your life and play this game together, then we need to trust each other, at least enough to know each other's secrets. He paused. I showed you mine. What's yours? Celine thought about it. I don't have any. Everyone has secrets. Not me. Miranda made sure of that. She stripped everything away until there was nothing left to hide. Celine met his eyes. But I'll tell you what I do have. I have rage, years of it, and now I finally have somewhere to point it. Adrian's smile was slow and approving. Then we're going to get along just fine. The next 3 days passed in a blur. Diana arrived at the hotel early Thursday morning with a dress bag, a jewelry box, and a thick folder of information. The dress was silk, ivory with a subtle gold undertone, simple enough to avoid looking bridal, but elegant enough to photograph well. The jewelry was antique, a necklace and earrings that had apparently belonged to Adrian's grandmother. He wants you to wear these, Diana said, setting the box on the table. They've been in his family for 3 generations. Celine stared at the diamonds glittering against black velvet. This is too much. It's strategy. You're not just marrying him, you're becoming part of his legacy. These show that he's claiming you, protecting you. Diana's expression was unreadable. In his world, symbols matter. What world is that exactly? The one where power is currency and reputation is armor. Diana sat down across from her. Adrian controls a network that spans half the city. Some of it's legitimate, real estate, investments, tech companies. Some of it's not. He's made enemies, a lot of them. And now you're going to be a target too. Celine's mouth went dry. A target. Anyone who wants to hurt him will look at you and see leverage. That's why you need to be smart. Never go anywhere alone. Never accept drinks from strangers. Never trust anyone who approaches you claiming to be a friend of Adrian's unless I've vetted them first. Diana leaned forward. I know this sounds paranoid, but in this world, paranoia keeps you alive. You're trying to scare me. I'm trying to prepare you. Diana's voice softened slightly. Adrian doesn't let people in. Ever. The fact that he chose you, the fact that he told you about the wheelchair, that means something. But it also means you're in deeper than you realize. Celine thought about the man who'd stood in front of her, offering her a chance to become someone powerful, someone feared. I can handle it, she said. Diana studied her, then she nodded. I believe you. Now let's make sure you look the part. They spent the rest of the day going over details. Who Adrian's key associates were. Names and faces that Celine committed to memory. What to say if the press asked questions. Variations on, we're very private, and we prefer to keep our personal life personal. How to handle the reception that would follow the ceremony. A small gathering of Adrian's closest business partners, all of whom would be watching her like hawks. They're going to test you, Diana said. They'll ask pointed questions. They'll try to rattle you. They want to see if you're strong enough to stand next to him. What happens if they decide I'm not? Then they'll try to remove you. Diana's smile was thin. Don't let them. Friday arrived too fast. Celine spent the morning packing up the hotel room. Not that there was much to pack. Everything she owned still fit in a duffel bag. Diana had offered to take her shopping, to build a wardrobe worthy of Mrs. Adrian Voss, but Celine had declined. She didn't want to show up at the wedding dressed in clothes someone else had chosen. She wanted to walk down that aisle as herself, even if herself was currently wearing jeans and a sweater that had seen better days. At noon, Diana called. There's been a development, she said without preamble. Your stepsister is missing. Celine sat up straight. What? Celeste left the estate sometime Wednesday night. Your stepmother filed a missing person report this morning, but it's pretty clear she ran away. There's security footage of her leaving with a suitcase and getting into a car with a man. Marcus, Celine said quietly. Who? Her boyfriend. She mentioned him when the creditors came. Miranda didn't know about him. Celine pressed her hand to her forehead. She ran away to avoid the wedding. Looks like it. Your stepmother is... Diana paused, and Celine heard something that might have been a smile in her voice. Let's just say she's not handling it well. Is she going to try to stop our wedding? She can try. But the agreement was for one Bennett woman at the altar. You're a Bennett. The creditors don't care which one. Diana's tone shifted. Adrian wanted me to ask if you want to postpone, given the circumstances. Celine thought about Miranda, probably tearing apart Celeste's room looking for clues, about the house slowly collapsing under the weight of unpaid debts, about Celeste somewhere out there with a boy she barely knew, thinking she'd escaped. No, Celine said. We go forward, tomorrow at 6. You're sure? I'm sure. That evening, Diana picked her up from the hotel for the last time. They drove through the city as the sun set, painting the buildings gold and orange. Celine watched the streets pass by and tried not to think about the fact that this was her last night as just Celine Bennett. Tomorrow, she'd be someone else entirely. The penthouse had been transformed. What had been a stark, modern space now held subtle touches of warmth, flowers in crystal vases, candles that hadn't been lit yet, a table set for 2 near the windows. Adrian was waiting, standing this time leaning against the window frame with a glass of something amber in his hand. He'd traded the wheelchair for a cane, a concession to the performance he'd have to give tomorrow, Celine assumed. Diana said Celeste ran, he said by way of greeting. Apparently. How do you feel about it? Celine considered the question. Honestly, relieved. I didn't want her there watching, judging. She'd be doing more than judging, she'd be planning. Adrian took a sip of his drink. Girls like Celeste don't run away for love. They run away because they're too cowardly to face consequences. Maybe. Celine crossed to the windows and looked out at the city. Or maybe she's smarter than I thought. Maybe she saw what Miranda really is and decided to get out while she could. You're generous. I'm realistic. She glanced at him. People change when they're scared enough. Maybe losing everything will teach her something. And if it doesn't, then she made her choice. Celine turned back to the view. Just like I made mine. They stood in silence for a moment, the city sprawling beneath them. Are you nervous? Adrian asked. About tomorrow? Celine thought about it. No, I'm terrified, but not about marrying you. Then what? About becoming someone I don't recognize. She wrapped her arms around herself. 2 years ago, I was someone different. I had plans, dreams, a future. Then my father died, and I just stopped. I let Miranda turn me into this small, quiet thing that didn't fight back. And now I'm about to become your wife and step into a world I don't understand, and I'm scared that I'll lose myself again, that I'll become whoever you need me to be and forget who I actually am. Adrian set down his glass and moved to stand beside her. Do you know why I chose you? You said it was because I was strong. I said it was because you survived. There's a difference. He looked at her, his gray eyes steady. Strength is easy to fake. Survival, real survival, that requires something deeper. It requires knowing exactly who you are at your core and refusing to let anyone take that away, no matter how hard they try. He paused. Miranda tried to break you for 2 years. She failed. You're still here, still fighting. That's not something you lose just because you put on a ring and change your name. How do you know? Because I've been watching you, and I've never once seen you be anything other than exactly who you are. He smiled slightly. Even when who you are is inconvenient. Celine felt something tight in her chest loosen just a fraction. Thank you, she said quietly. Don't thank me. Just don't lose that edge. He picked up his glass again. I need a wife who can hold her own in a room full of sharks. If you show up tomorrow trying to be demure and sweet, we're both screwed. I've never been sweet a day in my life. Good, keep it that way. Diana emerged from one of the side rooms. Your suite is ready, Miss Bennett. I've laid out everything you'll need for tomorrow. Celine followed her through the penthouse to a wing she hadn't seen before. The suite was beautiful, all soft grays and silvers, with a bedroom that overlooked the river and a bathroom that belonged in a magazine. Her duffel bag looked pathetic, sitting on the plush armchair. "This is yours," Diana said. "Your space. Adrian won't come in here unless you invite him." "He told you to say that?" "He told me to make sure you felt safe." Diana's expression was hard to read. "He's a lot of things, but he keeps his word. If he said he won't touch you unless you want him to, he meant it." Celine sank onto the edge of the bed. "Why are you helping him? You could work anywhere." "I could," Diana agreed, "but I work for him because he's the only person in this city who sees potential instead of limitations. He saw it in you. He saw it in me 5 years ago when I was just another lawyer drowning in debt and bad choices. He gave me a chance to be more than what everyone else thought I could be." She headed for the door. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." After she left, Celine lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. In less than 24 hours, she'd be married to a man she barely knew. A man who could walk but pretended he couldn't. A man who'd built an empire on deception and fear. A man who'd looked at her and seen something worth protecting. She thought about her father, about what he would say if he could see her now. Maybe he'd be disappointed. Maybe he'd tell her she was making a terrible mistake. Or maybe he'd understand that sometimes survival meant becoming someone different, someone harder, someone who couldn't be broken by people like Miranda. Celine closed her eyes. Tomorrow, she'd find out which one she was becoming. She woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the smell of coffee from somewhere in the suite. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The penthouse, Adrian, the wedding that was happening in less than 12 hours. Celine sat up and found a tray on the nightstand. Coffee, fresh fruit, pastries that looked like they'd been made by someone who actually cared about their job. A note in Diana's precise handwriting. "Eat something. You'll need your strength." She ate mechanically, tasting nothing, then showered in water hot enough to turn her skin pink. When she emerged, Diana was waiting in the bedroom with a makeup artist and a hairstylist who both looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. "We're keeping it simple," Diana said, interpreting Celine's expression. "Adrian's orders. He doesn't want you looking like a doll." The makeup artist, a thin woman named Kara who had the kind of tired eyes that suggested she'd seen everything, tilted Celine's face toward the light. "Good bone structure," she muttered. "Won't need much." She was right. 20 minutes later, Celine looked like a sharper, more defined version of herself. The hairstylist left her dark hair down in loose waves, pinning back just enough to keep it out of her face. When they finished, Celine barely recognized the woman in the mirror. She looked older, harder, ready. "The dress," Diana said, and the other women cleared out. Celine stood in front of the full-length mirror while Diana carefully lifted the ivory silk from its garment bag. Up close, the dress was even more beautiful, deceptively simple, with clean lines that skimmed her body without clinging. The neckline was high enough to be elegant, low enough to suggest she wasn't a child. The fabric moved like water when she walked. Diana fastened the necklace around her throat, diamonds that probably cost more than the estate was worth, and stepped back. "Well?" Diana asked. Celine stared at her reflection. The woman looking back at her wasn't the girl who'd scrubbed floors and swallowed insults. She wasn't the daughter mourning her father or the stepdaughter trying to survive. She was someone new, someone who could stand next to Adrian Voss and not look like she was drowning. "I'll do," Celine said. Diana's mouth curved. "You'll more than do. You ready?" "No." "Yes." The ceremony was being held in a private room on the top floor of Adrian's building, a space with glass walls that overlooked the entire city. When Celine arrived, there were already a dozen people waiting. She recognized some of them from the files Diana had shown her. Marcus Chen, Adrian's head of security, built like he could break someone in half without trying. Victoria Laurent, who ran the legitimate side of Adrian's real estate empire and dressed like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. James Park, the attorney who handled the kind of legal problems that never saw the inside of a courtroom, and Adrian standing near the windows in a black suit that probably cost more than a car. He'd abandoned the wheelchair entirely. The cane was gone too. He stood on his own, tall and solid and completely in control of the room. When he saw Celine, something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "Miss Bennet," he said, his voice carrying across the space. "You look acceptable," she supplied. "I was going to say formidable." The officiant, a severe-looking woman in gray, cleared her throat. "Shall we begin?" Celine walked to Adrian's side. Up close, she could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands were loose at his sides but ready to move fast if needed. He was nervous. Actually nervous. Somehow that made her feel better. The ceremony was brief. No music, no flowers beyond the simple arrangements on the side tables. No sentimentality. The officiant read the standard vows in a tone that suggested she'd done this 1,000 times and would do it 1,000 more. Adrian's responses were clear and unhesitating. When it was Celine's turn, she kept her voice steady even though her heart was trying to beat its way out of her chest. "Do you, Celine Marie Bennet, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" She looked at Adrian, at the man who'd offered her a way out when she had nothing left, the man who'd seen her at her lowest and decided she was worth something. "I do," she said. The officiant nodded. "By the power vested in me by the city, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Adrian's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "Still terrified?" he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. "Absolutely." "Good." And then he kissed her. It wasn't what she'd expected. Not performative or demanding or designed to prove anything to the people watching. It was careful. Almost gentle. Like he understood that she was standing on the edge of something enormous, and he wasn't going to push her over. When he pulled back, his gray eyes were darker. "There," he said quietly. "That wasn't so bad." "Speak for yourself." He smiled, a real one this time, and turned to face the room. "Thank you all for being here. Let's move to the reception." The gathering afterward was small but intense. Adrian's people circulated through the room like sharks, watching Celine with varying degrees of interest and suspicion. She accepted a glass of champagne from a server and took up a position near the windows, trying to look like she belonged there. Victoria Laurent approached first. She was in her 40s, impeccably dressed, with the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mrs. Voss," she said, "congratulations." "Thank you." "I have to admit we were all surprised when Adrian announced the engagement. He's not exactly the marrying type." Victoria's smile sharpened. "Or he wasn't, anyway. What changed his mind?" Celine met her gaze steadily. "You'd have to ask him." "I'm asking you." "Then I'll give you the same answer I'll give anyone else who asks. Our relationship is private. We prefer to keep it that way." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "You've been coached." "I've been prepared." Celine took a sip of champagne. "There's a difference." For a moment, Victoria just looked at her. Then she laughed, sharp and surprised. "Maybe you'll survive after all." She leaned in slightly. "Word of advice. Half the people in this room are looking for a weakness to exploit. The other half are looking for an ally. Figure out which half you're dealing with before you say anything that matters." "Which half are you?" "Neither. I'm the half that's waiting to see if you're actually useful." Victoria's smile was thin. "Adrian doesn't make careless moves. The fact that he married you means something. I just haven't figured out what yet." She walked away, leaving Celine alone again. Marcus Chen was next. He didn't bother with pleasantries. "You know how to shoot?" Celine blinked. "What?" "A gun. You know how to use one?" "No. Learn." He pulled out his phone, typed something, and showed her the screen. "That's the address of a range. Diana will take you next week. You need to know how to protect yourself." "Is that really necessary?" Marcus gave her a look that suggested she'd just asked if breathing was necessary. "You're married to the most dangerous man in the city. People are going to come after you just to get to him. So yeah, it's necessary." He walked away before she could respond. James Park approached with a friendlier expression, though his eyes were just as calculating as Victoria's. "Don't let Marcus scare you. He's paranoid by nature." "He didn't scare me." "No?" James studied her. "Good. You're going to need that. This world, Adrian's world, it's not kind to people who show fear." "I'm starting to understand that." "Are you?" He tilted his head. "Because from where I'm standing, you look like someone who just jumped off a cliff and is hoping she grows wings on the way down." Celine's jaw tightened. Is there a point to this conversation? Just making sure you know what you've gotten yourself into. Adrian's enemies are creative. They'll go after your family, your friends, anyone you care about. They'll dig into your past and weaponize anything they find. And they won't stop just because you're married to him. If anything, that makes you a bigger target. James's voice was conversational, like he was discussing the weather. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to prepare you. There's a difference. Everyone keeps saying that. Because it's true. He glanced across the room to where Adrian was talking with Victoria. He chose you for a reason. I'm just trying to figure out if you're strong enough to justify that choice. I guess we'll find out, Celine said. James smiled. I guess we will. The next hour was more of the same. Adrian's people approached one by one, sizing her up, testing her, trying to find the cracks in her armor. By the time the reception started winding down, Celine felt like she'd been through a combat zone. Adrian appeared at her elbow. You're doing well. I feel like I've been interrogated by the entire room. You have. They're making sure you're not a liability. He guided her toward a quieter corner. What do you think of them? I think they're all waiting for me to fail. Some of them. Others are waiting to see if you're worth their loyalty. He paused. Victoria likes you. She has a strange way of showing it. She respects strength. You stood your ground. That's more than most people do the first time they meet her. Adrian's hand settled at the small of her back, warm through the silk. Marcus will have you shooting by next week. James will start testing you on legal strategy, and Victoria will probably try to recruit you for one of her projects. Welcome to the family. This is your family. Close enough. He looked down at her, his expression unreadable. You survived the first test. That's good. The next one will be harder. What's the next one? Dinner with Miranda. Celine's stomach dropped. What? She called while you were getting ready, demanded to speak with me. I told her we'd come by the estate tomorrow evening. Adrian's smile was cold. She wants to congratulate us on the marriage and probably try to squeeze more money out of the arrangement. You said yes? I said we'd consider it, but we're going. He tilted his head. Unless you're not ready. Celine thought about Miranda's face, about walking back into that house as Adrian Voss's wife instead of the unpaid help. I'm ready, she said. Good. Because this is where we start taking her apart. The guests began filtering out, offering final congratulations that felt more like warnings. When the room was finally empty except for Diana, Adrian turned to Celine. You should rest, he said. It's been a long day. What about you? I have work to do. I'll be in my office if you need anything. He started to walk away, then stopped. Celine? Yes? You did well today. Better than I expected. Was that a compliment? It was a fact. He smiled slightly. But yes, take it as a compliment if you want. After he left, Diana walked Celine back to her suite. How are you holding up? Diana asked. I'm not sure yet. Ask me tomorrow after I've processed the fact that I just married a crime lord in front of witnesses. Diana's mouth twitched. For what it's worth, you handled yourself well. I've seen grown men crack under less pressure than Victoria Laurent's stare. She's terrifying. She's effective. There's a difference. Diana opened the door to Celine's suite. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be interesting. Alone in the suite, Celine kicked off the heels that had been slowly killing her feet and collapsed onto the bed. The dress pooled around her like liquid silver. She stared at the ceiling and tried to make sense of the last 12 hours. She was married to Adrian Voss, the man everyone feared, and somehow, impossibly, she didn't regret it. Her phone buzzed, a text from a number she didn't recognize. I heard you got married. Congratulations, I guess. See Celeste. Celine stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. Where are you? The response came quickly. Somewhere Mom can't find me. Is she furious? Probably. She called Adrian to set up dinner tomorrow. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, be careful. She's planning something. She always is. Celine frowned. What do you mean? Just trust me. Don't drink anything she offers you. Don't eat anything she makes. Don't trust anything she says. A pause, then another message. I know I was awful to you. I'm sorry. I didn't know how bad it was until I left. Celine's throat tightened. She typed, "Are you safe?" "Yeah. Marcus is nice, really nice. And he's nothing like the guys Mom tried to set me up with." Another pause. "I should have stood up for you. I'm sorry I didn't." Celine sat up, her heart pounding. This was the first real conversation she'd had with Celeste in 2 years. The first time her stepsister had sounded like an actual person instead of Miranda's shadow. "It's not too late to be different," Celine typed. "You can still choose who you want to be." The response took longer this time. "Maybe. I don't know who that is yet. Figure it out. And stay away from Miranda. She'll drag you down with her when this is over." "What do you mean when this is over?" Celine hesitated, then decided on honesty. "Your mother embezzled from my father, forged documents, stole his life insurance. I have proof, and eventually that proof is going to destroy her." No response for a full minute. Then, "Holy shit. Yeah. Does Adrian know? He's helping me. Of course he is. He's good at destroying people." Celeste sent a string of crying, laughing emojis. "Mom has no idea what she's up against, does she?" "No, she doesn't." "Good. She deserves it." A pause. "I'm going to stay away. Far away. I don't want any part of whatever happens next." "Smart." "Celine?" "Yeah?" "Be careful tomorrow. I mean it. She's not going to take this lying down." "I know." The conversation ended. Celine set the phone down and stared at it for a long moment. Celeste wasn't beyond saving. Not yet. She was scared and confused and finally starting to see Miranda for what she really was. That was something. Maybe not much, but something. Celine changed out of the dress and into the hotel robe she'd brought with her, then walked to the windows. The city spread out below her, all lights and movement and life. Somewhere out there, Miranda was probably pacing the estate, planning her next move. Somewhere out there, Celeste was hiding with a boy Miranda had never approved of. And here, in this tower, Celine stood as Mrs. Adrian Voss, married to a man who'd built an empire on secrets and fear. A knock at the door made her turn. Adrian stood in his doorway, still in his wedding suit but with the jacket off and the tie loosened. He looked almost human. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Can't stop thinking." Celine gestured to the windows. "How do you do this every day? The performance, the constant testing, the weight of everyone watching to see if you'll slip?" "Practice." He came to stand beside her, and remembering that they're more afraid of me than I am of them. "Are you ever actually afraid?" "Of course." He met her eyes. "Fear keeps you sharp. It's only dangerous if you let it control you." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the city. "I got a text from Celeste," Celine said, finally. Adrian's expression didn't change. "And?" "She warned me about Miranda, said to be careful tomorrow." "Do you believe her?" "I think she's starting to see the truth. Whether that's enough to save her?" Celine shrugged. "I don't know yet." "You're still hoping she'll change." "I'm hoping she'll choose to change. There's a difference." Adrian smiled slightly. "You're an optimist." "I'm a realist who hasn't completely given up on people yet." Celine turned to face him fully. "Is that going to be a problem?" "No, it might even be useful." He studied her face. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone broken. Someone who'd do what I told them and not ask questions." His eyes were intent. "But you're not broken. You're angry, and you're learning to use that anger instead of swallowing it." "You sound approving." "I am." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture surprisingly gentle. "Anger is a tool. Fear is a tool. Even grief can be a tool if you know how to use it. The people who survive in this world are the ones who understand that emotions aren't weaknesses, they're weapons." Celine's breath caught. "Is that what you do? Turn everything into a weapon?" "Everything and everyone." He dropped his hand. "Including myself." "And me? You're different." His voice was quiet. "You're the one person in this building I don't want to turn into a weapon. I want you to stay exactly as you are, sharp and stubborn, and refusing to break no matter how hard they push." "Why?" "Because that's the woman I need standing beside me when this all goes to hell. Not someone I've shaped into a tool, someone who chose this on her own terms." He paused. "Did you choose this?" Celine thought about the question. about the hotel room and the broken fountain, and the moment she'd decided to get in Diana's car instead of walking away. "Yes," she said, "I chose this." "Then we're going to be fine." He stepped back toward the door. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we walk into the lion's den, and I need you sharp." After he left, Celine returned to the windows. Tomorrow, they'd go back to the estate. Back to the house where she'd spent 2 years being ground down into nothing. But this time, she wouldn't be walking in as the help or the forgotten daughter or the girl nobody wanted. She'd be walking in as Adrian Voss's wife. And that changed everything. She pressed her hand against the glass and smiled. Sunday evening arrived too fast. Celine dressed carefully. A dark green dress that Diana had procured from somewhere. Elegant without being flashy, paired with the diamond earrings from the wedding. She looked expensive, untouchable, exactly the image they needed to sell. Adrian was waiting in the main room, back in the wheelchair. The transformation was seamless, shoulders slumped just slightly, hands resting loose in his lap, expression carefully neutral. If Celine hadn't seen him stand, hadn't watched him walk across the penthouse like he owned the world, she would have believed he was exactly what he appeared to be. "Ready?" he asked. "No, but let's go anyway." The drive to the estate was quiet. Marcus drove, his eyes constantly scanning the road, the buildings, everything. Diana sat in the passenger seat, typing on her phone. Celine and Adrian sat in the back, not touching but close enough that she could feel the heat of him beside her. "Remember," Adrian said as they turned onto the familiar tree-lined street, "let her make the first move. Don't react to anything she says. We're here to be polite, accept her congratulations, and leave, nothing more. And if she pushes, then we push back, but calmly. We're in control here, not her." He glanced at Celine. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm about to walk back into a nightmare." "You're not walking in alone this time." The car pulled up to the estate's front gate. Marcus spoke into the intercom, and the gate swung open. As they drove up the long driveway, Celine saw the house with new eyes. The crumbling facade Miranda had never bothered to maintain, the overgrown gardens her father had once kept immaculate, the windows that needed washing. The whole place looked tired. Fitting. Marcus helped Adrian into the wheelchair, another seamless performance, and Celine walked beside him as they approached the front door. It opened before they reached it. Miranda stood in the doorway, dressed in cream and gold, her blonde hair perfect, her smile bright and false. She looked like she'd been waiting for this moment. "Celine," she said warmly, as if the last 2 years hadn't happened. "And Mr. Voss? Welcome. Please, come in." The house smelled the same. Furniture polish and expensive candles and something underneath that Celine had never been able to identify. Decay, maybe. The slow rot of something that had been beautiful once. Miranda led them to the sitting room, the same room where the creditors had delivered their ultimatum. She'd set up tea service on the side table, china cups and small cakes arranged like she was hosting royalty. "Please sit," Miranda said, settling into her usual chair. "Celine, why don't you pour?" It was a power play. A subtle reminder that even though Celine had left, Miranda still expected her to serve. Celine stayed exactly where she was. "I'm sure you can manage." Miranda's smile tightened. "Of course. How silly of me." She poured tea with practiced grace, handed cups to Adrian and Celine, and took one for herself. "I have to say, I was shocked when I heard about the wedding. So sudden." "We saw no reason to wait," Adrian said smoothly. "Still, one would think Celine might have invited her family. We are her family, after all." Miranda's eyes were sharp. "Unless she's told you otherwise." "Celine told me everything I need to know," Adrian said. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Miranda's smile didn't waver. "I'm sure she has her version of events. But you have to understand, Mr. Voss, Celine has always been difficult. Even when my dear husband was alive, she had a tendency to exaggerate, to seek attention." "Is that right?" Adrian said mildly. "It broke Richard's heart. He tried so hard to reach her, to make her feel included, but she always held herself apart, as if she was better than the rest of us." Miranda sipped her tea delicately. "When he died, I hoped she might finally soften. Instead, she became even more withdrawn, hostile even. I tried everything to help her, but—" She sighed dramatically. "Well, you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved." Celine's hands were trembling with rage. She set down her teacup before she threw it. Adrian's hand found hers under the table, his grip firm and grounding. "That's an interesting story," he said, "very different from the one the financial records tell." Miranda went still. "I'm sorry?" "The records, bank statements, credit applications, forged signatures, they paint quite a different picture of who was hostile and who was trying to survive." Adrian's smile was pleasant. "Would you like to see them? I have copies." The color drained from Miranda's face. "I don't know what you're talking about." "No?" Adrian tilted his head. $2 million in life insurance that should have gone to Celine, $300,000 in fraudulent vendor invoices, personal purchases charged to the company accounts. Shall I continue? Miranda stood up abruptly. "Get out." "We were just leaving," Adrian said calmly. Marcus appeared in the doorway, ready to wheel him out, but Adrian held up a hand. "Actually, there's one more thing." "I said get out!" "The debt is cleared," Adrian continued, as if she hadn't spoken. "All of it. You get to keep the house, keep your lifestyle, keep pretending you're someone who matters. But understand this." His voice went cold. "You exist because I allow it. The moment I decide you're more trouble than you're worth, this all goes away. The house, the money, the illusion of respectability, all of it." Miranda was shaking. "You can't threaten me." "That wasn't a threat. It was a fact." Adrian gestured to Marcus. "We're done here." As they left, Miranda's voice followed them, high and sharp. "This isn't over, Celine. You think you've won, but you're just a pawn. He'll get tired of you, and then where will you be?" Celine didn't look back. In the car, she finally let herself breathe. "Well," Diana said from the front seat, "that went about as expected." "She's panicking," Adrian said. "Good." Celine looked at him. "You wanted her to panic." "I wanted her to understand that the rules have changed, that she's not untouchable anymore." He met her eyes. "How do you feel?" Celine thought about Miranda's face when Adrian mentioned the records, about the way her stepmother's perfect facade had cracked just enough to show the desperation underneath. "I feel," she said slowly, "like this is just the beginning." Adrian smiled. "Now you're learning." The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm Celine hadn't expected. Days blurred together in a strange mix of normalcy and calculated violence. She woke in her suite overlooking the river, ate breakfast while reading reports Diana left for her about Adrian's business holdings, spent afternoons learning things she'd never imagined needing to know. How to read a room full of dangerous people. How to hold a gun without flinching. How to smile at someone while imagining their downfall. Marcus took her to the shooting range twice a week. The first time, she'd barely been able to hold the pistol steady. By the third week, she could hit the center target more often than not. "Better," Marcus said, watching her reload, "but you're still hesitating before you pull the trigger." "Because I'm shooting at paper." "Pretend it's not paper. Pretend it's someone coming at you, someone who wants to hurt you." He adjusted her stance slightly. "Fear makes you freeze, and anger makes you sloppy. You need to find the place in between." Celine raised the gun, sighted down the barrel, and squeezed the trigger. The shot hit just left of center. "What place is that?" she asked. "Control." Marcus stepped back. "Do it again. And this time, breathe through it." She did. The next shot hit dead center. Marcus smiled, a rare expression on his usually stoic face. "Now you're getting it." Victoria recruited her for lunch meetings with potential investors, using Celine as a kind of human lie detector. "Watch their eyes when I mention the numbers," Victoria would murmur. "Tell me if they're buying it." Celine learned to read micro-expressions, to catch the tiny tells that meant someone was lying or nervous or planning something. She learned that Victoria's cold exterior hid a razor-sharp mind and a surprising sense of humor. Once, after a particularly tense negotiation, Victoria had leaned back in her chair and said, "That man is an idiot, and his wife is sleeping with his accountant. Mark my words." 3 weeks later, the man's divorce hit the news. Victoria had just smiled. James started leaving case files on her desk, hypothetical scenarios that she suspected weren't hypothetical at all. If someone embezzled $2 million over 2 years, how would you prove it in court? Or, what's the best way to structure a trust so the beneficiary can't access the principal until certain conditions are met? Celine worked through the problems, applying everything she'd learned from her father about business and everything she was learning from James about the law. When she got stuck, she asked questions. James answered them with the patience of someone teaching a particularly bright student. "You're good at this," he said one afternoon, reviewing her analysis of a complex fraud case. "Have you ever considered law school?" "I considered a lot of things before my father died." "Consider them again. You've got the mind for it." He tapped the papers. "And the temperament. You don't get emotional about the details. You just work the problem." "Is that a compliment?" "For me?" "Yes. But the person she spent the most time with was Adrian. They had dinner together most evenings in the penthouse, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about the business, the legitimate holdings and the less legitimate ones, the alliances that kept his empire running and the enemies who would tear it down if they could. She told him about her father, about the man Richard Bennett had been before Miranda had gotten her claws into him. "He sounds like he was decent," Adrian said one night, pouring wine into her glass. "He was. Too decent for his own good, probably." Celine swirled the wine. He believed people were fundamentally good, that if you treated them with respect and fairness, they'd do the same. And your stepmother proved him wrong. She proved that some people see kindness as weakness, and they'll exploit it until there's nothing left. Celine took a sip. "You wouldn't have liked him. You're too different." "Maybe. Or maybe I would have respected him for sticking to his principles even when they cost him." Adrian leaned back. "Not everyone has the courage to stay soft in a hard world." "Is that what you think he was? Soft?" "I think he was strong enough to be gentle. That's not the same as weak." Adrian met her eyes. "And I think he raised a daughter who learned from both his strengths and his mistakes. That's something." Celine felt something warm unfold in her chest. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not dismissing him. For understanding that being good doesn't make you stupid." "I never thought it did." Adrian set down his glass. "But I do think it makes you vulnerable. And vulnerability in this world gets you killed. Is that why you're never vulnerable?" "I'm vulnerable every time I let you see me walk." He said it lightly, but there was truth underneath. "You could destroy me with that information. One phone call to the right person, and my entire empire crumbles." "I wouldn't." "I know. That's why I told you." He stood, abandoning the wheelchair entirely when they were alone. "Trust is the most dangerous weapon there is, and I'm trusting you with mine." The words hung between them, heavy with implications Celine wasn't ready to unpack. She changed the subject. "What's the plan with Miranda? You said we were taking her apart slowly. When does that start?" Adrian's smile turned cold. "It already has." The first crack appeared 3 weeks after the wedding. Celine was having coffee with Victoria when Diana appeared with her tablet, her expression carefully neutral. "You should see this." The tablet showed a news article, small, buried on page 6 of the business section, but damning nonetheless. An investigation into Bennett Industries' accounting practices during Richard Bennett's final year. Questions about irregular transactions and missing funds. No names mentioned yet, but the implication was clear. "Did you?" Celine looked at Adrian, who'd appeared in the doorway. "James filed an anonymous tip with the Regulatory Commission," he said calmly. "They're going to audit the company's books. When they do, they'll find exactly what we want them to find." Victoria scanned the article. "How long until this connects to Miranda directly?" 2 months. Maybe 3. They'll trace the accounts, find her signature on the documents, build their case. Adrian's eyes were hard. "By the time they're done, she won't be able to claim ignorance." Celine's hands were shaking. "She's going to know this came from us." "Let her know. Let her panic. Panic makes people careless." He moved closer. "Are you having second thoughts?" Celine thought about her father's face in those last months, about the stress lines around his eyes, the way he'd aged years in the span of weeks, about coming home to find him slumped over his desk, gone before the ambulance could arrive. "No," she said. "No second thoughts." The second crack came 2 weeks later. Miranda called the penthouse. Diana answered, listened for 30 seconds, then wordlessly handed the phone to Celine. "What have you done?" Miranda's voice was shrill. "The bank froze my accounts. They're saying there's an investigation. They won't tell me anything except that it's related to Richard's estate. This is you, isn't it? You and that man you married." Celine kept her voice level. "I haven't done anything." "Liar, everything was fine until you left, until you married him. Now suddenly there are audits and investigations, and Miranda's voice cracked. You're trying to destroy me. I don't have to try. You destroyed yourself when you stole from my father. Silence on the other end. Then quieter. I never stole anything. That money was mine. I was his wife. You forged his signature. You opened accounts in the company's name and funneled money into your personal holdings. You took his life insurance that should have gone to me. Celine's voice was cold. That's not being a wife. That's being a thief. He owed me. Miranda's composure shattered completely. I gave him the best years of my life. I raised Celeste alone until he came along. I deserved that money. You deserved nothing, and now you're going to lose everything. Celine ended the call. Her hands were trembling. Adrian took the phone from her and set it aside. Good, he said simply. I feel sick. That means you're human. It'll pass. He guided her to the couch. The first time you really hurt someone who hurt you, it feels wrong, like you've become the thing you hated, but you haven't. There's a difference between justice and cruelty. Is there? Because right now it feels pretty cruel. She had 2 years to treat you with basic human decency. She chose cruelty every single day. What we're doing, Adrian sat beside her. What we're doing is giving her exactly what she earned, not more, not less. Celine leaned her head back. When does it stop feeling terrible? Maybe never. Maybe that's the price of taking control of your own life. His hand found hers. But I can tell you this, it gets easier. The second time, the third time. Eventually you learn to separate what you feel from what you need to do. And then you become dangerous. Is that what you are? Dangerous. I'm the most dangerous person you'll ever meet. He said it matter-of-factly. But I'm on your side. Remember that when this gets hard. The calls from Miranda became more frequent, desperate. She tried threats first. She'd go to the press. She'd tell everyone what kind of man Adrian really was. She'd ruin them both. When that didn't work, she tried begging. She needed money, just a little to get by until the investigation cleared. She'd pay it back, she promised. Celine stopped answering. But Celeste called too, and those calls Celine took. Mom's losing it, Celeste said during one late-night conversation. She keeps calling me, asking where I am, begging me to come home. I think she's scared. She should be. Celine, Celeste's voice was small. What's going to happen to her? She's going to face consequences for what she did. Prison, probably. Asset forfeiture. Public humiliation. All of it. And there's nothing I can do? You could testify against her. Tell them what you know about her spending, her behavior, anything that might be useful to the investigation. Celine paused. But that would mean choosing a side, and I don't think you're ready for that. Celeste was quiet for a long moment. I don't want her to go to prison. Even after everything she did? She's still my mother. Celeste made a frustrated sound. I know she's terrible. I know what she did to your dad, to you, to everyone. But she's all I've ever had. How do I just walk away from that? Celine softened slightly. You don't have to do it all at once. You just have to decide who you want to be. Someone who enables her or someone who stops her. There's no middle ground anymore. That's not fair. No, it's not, but it's true. After Celeste hung up, Adrian emerged from his office. She's going to choose Miranda. You know that, right? Maybe. Or maybe she'll surprise us. You're still hoping she'll change. I'm hoping she'll have the chance to change. What she does with that chance, Celine shrugged. That's on her. 2 months after the wedding, the investigation went public in a big way. Front-page news, federal charges filed against Miranda Bennett for wire fraud, embezzlement, and forgery. The estate was seized pending the outcome of the trial. Miranda's bail was set at $500,000, money she didn't have anymore, because every account she'd controlled had been frozen. She called from the county jail, and this time Celine answered. Please, Miranda's voice was broken, all the polish stripped away. Please, Celine, I'll give everything back. I'll testify, I'll cooperate, whatever you want. Just get me out of here. No. Please, I'm begging you. I can't stay in here. You don't understand what it's like. I understand perfectly. It's what you deserve. Celine's voice was ice. You spent 2 years grinding me down, making me feel worthless, taking everything my father built and burning through it like it didn't matter. Now you get to see what it feels like to have nothing, to be nothing. I'm sorry. Miranda was crying now. I'm sorry, okay? I was wrong. I was terrible to you, I admit it. Just please. Being sorry isn't enough. It doesn't fix what you broke. It doesn't bring my father back. It doesn't give me those 2 years back. Celine's throat was tight. You made your choices. Now live with them. She hung up. This time, she didn't feel sick. She felt nothing at all. Adrian found her standing at the windows, staring out at the city. How do you feel? He asked. Empty. Is that normal? Yes. You just drew a line in the sand, decided that some things can't be forgiven, some people can't be saved. That takes something out of you. He stood beside her. But it also makes you stronger, because now you know exactly what you're capable of. I'm capable of destroying someone who destroyed me first. You're capable of protecting yourself, of demanding justice when everyone else would tell you to be the bigger person and move on. Adrian's reflection in the glass was sharp. The world tells women to forgive, to be gracious, to turn the other cheek, but sometimes the right thing to do is burn it all down and build something new from the ashes. Celine turned to face him. Is that what we're doing? That's exactly what we're doing. The trial was set for 6 months out. In the meantime, Miranda sat in county lockup, unable to make bail, unable to contact anyone except her court-appointed attorney. The press had a field day. Wealthy widow steals from dead husband's estate, faces decades in prison. Some outlets painted her as a victim of circumstance. Most didn't. Celine watched it all from a distance, insulated by Adrian's name and money and the fortress he'd built around them both. But she knew the real confrontation was still coming. It arrived in the form of an invitation. Victoria dropped it on Celine's desk one afternoon. Heavy cardstock, elegant script, the kind of invitation that cost more than most people spent on rent. The Hartwell Foundation Gala, Victoria said. Annual fundraiser for the city's elite. $5,000 a plate. Everyone who matters will be there. Celine scanned the invitation. Why are you showing me this? Because Adrian wants to go. And he wants to bring you. Victoria's smile was thin. It's time to introduce you to the real players in this city. The people who control the money, the power, the decisions that shape everything. You've been hidden away for 2 months. They're curious. Curious isn't good. Curious is opportunity. You show up on Adrian's arm. You show them you're not some delicate flower who needs protection. You show them you're a threat in your own right. Victoria leaned against the desk. This is your debut. Make it count. Celine looked at the invitation again. The gala was 3 weeks away. 3 weeks to prepare for the kind of event where one wrong word could destroy a reputation, where alliances were formed and broken over champagne and canapes, where people smiled at you while plotting your downfall. She thought about the girl who used to scrub floors and swallow insults. That girl was gone. What do I need to know? Celine asked. Victoria's smile widened. Everything, and we don't have much time. The next 3 weeks were a crash course in high society warfare. Victoria taught her which families controlled which industries, who was sleeping with whom, which seemingly friendly faces hid the sharpest knives. Diana drilled her on current events, economic trends, political developments, anything that might come up in conversation. James ran her through scenarios, testing her ability to deflect invasive questions and turn conversations to her advantage. Someone asked about your father's estate, James said during one session. What do you say? I say the matter is in the hands of the authorities, and I'm confident justice will be served. Too stiff. Try again, Celine thought. I say my father was a good man who deserved better, and I'm making sure his legacy is protected. Then I change the subject to their business or family or whatever gets them talking about themselves. James nodded approval. Better. People love talking about themselves. Use that. Adrian watched most of these sessions from the sidelines, occasionally offering input, but mostly letting his team shape her. Once, after a particularly brutal practice round with Victoria, he'd pulled Celine aside. You don't have to do this, he'd said quietly. The gala, the performance, any of it. If you want to stay here, stay private, I'll make it work. No. Selena shook her head. I'm tired of hiding. I want them to see me. I want them to know I'm not going anywhere. They're going to come at you hard, test you, provoke you, try to find weaknesses. Let them try. Celine met his eyes. I've survived worse than rich people at a party. He'd smiled at that. Yes, you have. The night of the gala, Diana arrived with a garment bag that she hung carefully in Celine's closet. What is it? Celine asked. Open it. The dress was midnight blue, almost black in certain light, with a neckline that plunged just low enough to be daring and a skirt that moved like water. It was stunning, powerful, the kind of dress that announced you were someone worth noticing. Adrian chose it, Diana said. He has good taste. He has expensive taste. Same thing in this world. Diana began laying out jewelry. The diamonds you wore at the wedding won't work here, too traditional. We need something with edge. She produced a necklace, white gold and sapphires, modern and sharp. The earrings matched. When Celine put them on, she barely recognized herself. The woman in the mirror looked dangerous. Good. Adrian was waiting when she emerged, dressed in a black tuxedo that fit him like it had been made specifically for his body, which it probably had been. He'd abandoned the wheelchair completely tonight. This event was important enough that he was revealing the truth to the people who mattered. When he saw her, something shifted in his expression. You look... He stopped, shook his head. Forget it. You know how you look. How do I look? Like you could destroy someone's entire world before dessert. He offered his arm. Ready to make an entrance? The gala was being held at the Meridian Hotel, the kind of place that had doormen in white gloves and chandeliers worth more than most houses. When Celine and Adrian arrived, every head in the entrance hall turned. She felt the weight of their stares like physical pressure. Curiosity, calculation, envy, disdain. They were all there, mixed together in expressions that tried to be polite. Adrian kept his hand at the small of her back, guiding her through the crowd. The woman in red at 2 o'clock is Senator Walsh's wife. She hates her husband and loves gossip. The man talking to her is Devin Cross, tech billionaire with political ambitions. The couple by the bar are the Hartfords, old money, suspicious of everyone who isn't, and the woman heading straight for us. Is someone you don't like? Celine finished, reading his body language. That obvious? You just went rigid. The woman approaching was in her 50s, immaculately dressed, with the kind of smile that didn't reach anywhere near her eyes. Adrian. How lovely to see you on your feet. I'd heard rumors, but I didn't believe them. Catherine. Adrian's tone was polite ice. May I introduce my wife, Celine? Catherine's eyes raked over Celine like she was inventory. How charming. I wasn't aware you were the marrying type, Adrian. What changed? I met the right person, Adrian said smoothly. How romantic. Catherine's smile sharpened. Though I have to say, I was surprised to hear you married Richard Bennett's daughter. Such a tragedy. What happened to that family? I heard the widow is facing criminal charges. There it was, the first thrust. Celine met Catherine's eyes steadily. Stepmother. She was my stepmother, not my mother, and yes, she's facing charges for what she did. Justice delayed isn't justice denied. Of course. Still, it must be difficult for you. All that scandal attached to your name. The scandal is attached to her name, not mine. I'm a Voss now. Celine let the words land. And the Voss name carries quite a bit of weight, doesn't it? Catherine's smile tightened. Indeed it does. Well, enjoy the evening. She swept away. Adrian's hand squeezed Celine's gently. First blood to you. Was that a test? Everything tonight is a test. He guided her toward the ballroom. And you just passed round one. The evening unfolded in a series of carefully orchestrated encounters. Victoria appeared with a tech investor who wanted to discuss Adrian's real estate portfolio. James materialized with a judge who had questions about a case involving one of Adrian's companies. Each time, Celine stood beside Adrian, contributing just enough to show she understood what was being discussed, deflecting personal questions with practiced ease. You're doing well, Victoria murmured during a brief pause. Better than I expected. I'm terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Just don't let them see it. Victoria nodded toward a cluster of women near the windows. Senator Walsh's wife is watching you. She's going to approach soon. Be ready. Sure enough, 5 minutes later, the senator's wife, Patricia, cornered Celine near the champagne fountain. Mrs. Voss, I've been dying to meet you. Patricia had the kind of voice that suggested she was sharing a secret. Tell me, how did you and Adrian meet? The story I heard was so romantic, but I'm sure it's been exaggerated. We met through family business, Celine said carefully. It wasn't particularly romantic. Oh, how disappointing. I was hoping for something more dramatic. Patricia leaned in. Is it true your stepmother tried to force you into the marriage? Celine's spine stiffened. Where did you hear that? Oh, you know how people talk. They say she owed Adrian money and offered you up as payment, like something out of a Victorian novel. Patricia's eyes gleamed. Of course, I told everyone that was ridiculous. You clearly married for love. The lie was so transparent, it was almost funny. Patricia wasn't defending Celine. She was fishing for confirmation, trying to get Celine to either confirm or deny the rumors so she could spread the truth to her friends. People say a lot of things, Celine said evenly. Very little of it is true, but I suppose that won't stop them from talking. Exactly. That's what I always say. Patricia touched Celine's arm conspiratorially. Between you and me, I think it's wonderful that you found happiness despite everything. And Adrian is so protective of you, isn't he? I saw how he looked at that awful Catherine when she mentioned your stepmother. Adrian is protective of what's his. Celine kept her smile pleasant. I'm fortunate to have him. And he's fortunate to have you, such a strong woman, surviving everything you've been through. Patricia's voice dripped with false sympathy. It must have been terrible, losing your father and then being treated so poorly by that woman. I can't imagine. No, Celine thought, you can't. It was difficult, she said aloud. But I'm past that now. Of course you are. And now you have everything, wealth, status, a powerful husband. Patricia's smile was sharp. Some women would kill for what you have. Some women probably will try, Celine said lightly. Good thing I know how to protect myself. Patricia laughed, but her eyes were calculating. I like you. You're tougher than you look. Thank you. I'll take that as a compliment. After Patricia drifted away, Diana appeared at Celine's elbow. Well handled. She's going to tell everyone you're a threat, which is exactly what we want. Is it? In this world? Absolutely. Weakness gets you eaten alive. Strength gets you respect, or at least caution, which is almost as good. Diana handed her a fresh glass of champagne. You're doing better than most people on their first outing. Keep it up. The dinner was a multi-course affair that seemed designed to last forever. Celine found herself seated between Adrian and a hedge fund manager who spent 20 minutes explaining why cryptocurrency was the future before his wife kicked him under the table. Across from her, a real estate developer's wife asked pointed questions about Celine's education, her family background, her plans for the future. I'm still figuring that out, Celine said honestly. Right now I'm focused on learning everything I can about Adrian's businesses and finding ways to contribute. How modern, the woman said with a smile that suggested it wasn't a compliment. Most wives in your position would be focused on charity work and social climbing. I'm not most wives. No, you're certainly not. The woman sipped her wine. I suppose when you marry someone like Adrian Voss, traditional expectations go out the window. I suppose they do. By the time dessert arrived, Celine felt like she'd been through a war. Every conversation was a minefield, every smile a potential trap. She understood now why Adrian had spent weeks preparing her. One wrong word, one moment of weakness, and these people would tear her apart. But she hadn't given them that moment. As the evening wound down and people began filtering toward the exits, Adrian leaned close. There's someone I want you to meet, he said quietly. The woman in silver by the east doors. Margaret Chen. Celine followed his gaze. The woman was older, maybe 70, with gray hair pulled back in an elegant knot and eyes that missed nothing. Who is she? The most powerful person in this room. She controls more wealth than everyone here combined, and she doesn't advertise it. If she approves of you, doors open. If she doesn't, Adrian's expression was serious. She's the real test. Everything else tonight was just warm-up. Celine's stomach dropped. Why didn't you tell me this earlier? Because I wanted you to be yourself, not someone trying to impress her. She can smell desperation from across the room. He offered his arm. Ready? No. Yes. They crossed the ballroom together. Margaret Chen watched them approach with an expression that gave nothing away. Mrs. Chen, Adrian said warmly, may I introduce my wife, Celine? Margaret extended her hand. Celine shook it, surprised by the strength in the older woman's grip. Mrs. Voss, Margaret said. Her voice was cultured, precise. I've heard quite a bit about you. I can only imagine what you've heard. Most of it unflattering, I'm sure. People in this city love a good scandal. Margaret's eyes were sharp. I knew your father, you know. Not well, but we served on a board together years ago. He was an honest man in a world that doesn't value honesty. Celine's throat tightened. He was. I was sorry to hear about his passing, and sorrier still to hear about what happened after. Margaret paused. Your stepmother was at this very gala 2 years ago, spending money that didn't belong to her and acting like she'd earned it. I remember thinking someone should stop her. I'm glad someone finally did. You know about the charges. My dear, I know about everything. It's how I've stayed alive this long. Margaret smiled slightly. The question is, what do you plan to do now? You've married well, extracted justice from the woman who wronged you. Where do you go from here? It was the question Celine had been avoiding. What did she want now that she'd gotten her revenge? I want to build something that matters, she said slowly. My father spent his life creating jobs, helping people, making something useful. I want to do the same, but I want to do it in a way that no one can take it from me. Margaret studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded. Good answer. Most people in your position would say they want to enjoy their newfound wealth, or focus on being a good wife, or some other vapid nonsense. She glanced at Adrian. You chose well. She has potential. I know, Adrian said. Don't waste it. Margaret turned back to Celine. If you're serious about building something, come see me next week. I sit on the boards of several foundations looking for fresh leadership. We'll talk about what you're capable of. She walked away before Celine could respond. What just happened? Celine asked. You passed the real test, Adrian said. Margaret Chen doesn't offer mentorship lightly. If she's willing to talk to you, it means she sees something worth investing in. I don't understand. You will. He guided her toward the exit. Come on, we've done enough for one night. In the car ride home, Celine leaned her head back and closed her eyes. How did I do? Really? Better than expected. Better than I did my first time. Adrian's hand found hers in the darkness. You held your own against people who've been playing this game for decades. That's not nothing. It felt like nothing. It felt like I was drowning and trying not to show it. That's what power feels like when you're learning to use it. Uncomfortable and terrifying, and like you're one mistake away from disaster. His thumb traced circles on her palm. But you didn't make any mistakes. You were exactly who you needed to be. Celine opened her eyes and looked at him. Who was that? Yourself, just sharper, more dangerous. He smiled. The woman I knew you could become. Back at the penthouse, Celine kicked off her heels and collapsed onto the couch. Adrian poured them both whiskey and sat beside her. To surviving your first society event, he said, raising his glass. To surviving. She clinked her glass against his and drank. The whiskey burned going down, but in a good way. When's the next one? 2 weeks. Smaller event, fewer sharks. You'll be fine. What if I'm not fine? What if I mess up, say the wrong thing, embarrass you? Then we handle it, together. Adrian set down his glass. You're not alone in this anymore, Celine. Whatever happens, we face it as partners. That was the deal. Partners. The word settled over her like a blanket. She'd spent so long being alone, first in grief, then in survival, that she'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone in her corner. Someone who saw her struggling and didn't use it against her. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For seeing me. When no one else did. When I didn't even see myself. Adrian was quiet for a moment. Then he reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture achingly gentle. I told you before. I chose you because you were already strong. I just gave you a reason to stop hiding it. His gray eyes were intense. Everything you did tonight, everything you've done these past 2 months, that's all you, not me. Don't forget that. Celine didn't trust herself to speak, so instead she leaned forward and kissed him. It wasn't like the wedding kiss, careful and controlled. This was real, honest. Born from weeks of growing trust and shared purpose, and the slow realization that the man sitting beside her had become someone she actually cared about. When she pulled back, Adrian's eyes had darkened. Celine, I know what I'm doing, she said, and I know you said you wouldn't touch me unless I wanted you to, so I'm telling you, I want you to. For a moment he didn't move. Then he stood, offered his hand, and pulled her to her feet. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I'm sure." He led her to his room, not hers, but his, a space she'd never entered before. It was simpler than she'd expected. Clean lines, dark colors, a bed that looked like it had actually been slept in. He kissed her again, and this time there was no hesitation, no performance. Just two people who'd been circling each other for weeks, finally giving in to what they both wanted. Later, lying in the darkness with Adrian's arm around her, Celine stared at the ceiling and tried to process everything that had changed. She was married to a dangerous man. She'd helped destroy her stepmother. She'd stepped into a world of wealth and power and manipulation that she barely understood. And somehow, impossibly, she was starting to build something new from the wreckage of her old life. "What are you thinking?" Adrian asked, his voice rough with sleep. "That I don't recognize myself anymore. Is that good or bad?" Celine thought about the girl who'd scrubbed floors, about the woman who'd walked into that gala with her head high and come out victorious. "I think it's good," she said. "I think I'm finally becoming who I was supposed to be all along." Adrian pulled her closer. "Then my work here is done." "Your work is just beginning. We still have to finish what we started." "With Miranda?" "With everything." Celine turned to face him in the darkness. "She's just the beginning. There are other people who need to pay, other wrongs to right, other battles to fight." Adrian smiled. "Now you sound like me. Maybe I'm learning from the best. Maybe you are." They fell asleep tangled together, and for the first time since her father's death, Celine felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The prosecution built their case methodically over the next 4 months. Celine watched from a distance as the evidence she'd helped gather became the foundation of the state's argument against Miranda. Bank records, forged signatures, testimony from vendors who'd never provided the services they'd billed for. Every piece of paper, every transaction, every lie Miranda had told came back to haunt her. James kept Celine updated. "They're offering her a plea deal. 10 years instead of 25 if she cooperates fully and provides restitution." "Will she take it?" Celine asked. "Her lawyer is advising her to, but Miranda—" James shook his head. "She still thinks she can talk her way out of this. She wants to go to trial." "Let her." Adrian looked up from the contract he was reviewing. "You're sure? A trial means publicity, means your name in the papers, reporters asking questions." "I'm sure." Celine met his eyes. "I want everyone to see exactly what she did. No plea deals, no quiet settlements. She gets her day in court, and then she gets exactly what she deserves." The trial started on a Tuesday in early autumn. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters, cameras, people who'd come just to watch the spectacle. Celine walked through them with her head high, Adrian beside her, Marcus and Diana flanking them like guards. She wore gray, professional, severe, the color of someone who wasn't here to perform, but to witness justice. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than she'd expected. Miranda sat at the defense table in a cheap suit her public defender had probably picked out, her blonde hair dull, her face older than it had been 6 months ago. When she saw Celine enter, something desperate and angry flashed across her expression. The prosecution called their first witness, an accountant who'd worked for Bennett Industries and noticed irregularities in the books. Then a bank officer who'd processed some of Miranda's fraudulent transfers. Each one added another brick to the wall, closing in around her. On the third day, they called Celine. Walking to the witness stand felt like walking through water. Every eye in the room was on her. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Ellen Reeves, gave her an encouraging nod. "Please state your name for the record." "Celine Marie Voss, formerly Bennett." "Mrs. Voss, how did you know the defendant?" "She was married to my father. She was my stepmother for 3 years before his death." Ellen walked her through the timeline, her father's marriage to Miranda, the changes in his behavior, his stress, his declining health, his death, and the aftermath. Miranda's treatment of Celine, the way she'd been reduced to unpaid labor in her own home. "Did you notice anything unusual about the estate's finances during this time?" "I noticed we were running out of money. My father had been comfortable, not wealthy, but secure. After he died, there were suddenly bills we couldn't pay, creditors calling, threats of foreclosure. But Miranda and Celeste kept spending like nothing had changed." "Did you investigate?" "Not at first. I was Celine paused, choosing her words carefully. I was grieving. I wasn't thinking clearly. But after I left the estate, I requested the financial records and discovered the extent of the fraud. Ellen entered the documents into evidence, page after page of Miranda's theft, projected onto screens for the jury to see. Celine watched their faces as they absorbed it. Shock, disgust, anger. Good. Miranda's lawyer, a tired-looking man who seemed to know he was fighting a losing battle, cross-examined her next. Mrs. Voss, isn't it true that you have a financial motive for testifying against my client? No. You stand to inherit your father's estate if Mrs. Bennet is convicted, don't you? I stand to see justice done for my father. The money doesn't matter, doesn't it? You married Adrian Voss shortly after leaving the estate, a man who agreed to clear the family debts in exchange for a bride. That sounds like a financial transaction to me. Celine's jaw tightened. My marriage is not on trial here. But it's relevant to your credibility. You're testifying against a woman who could block your inheritance, and you're married to a man who benefits from her conviction. The jury deserves to know your motives might not be as pure as you claim. My motive, Celine said clearly, is that she stole from my father. She forged his signature, embezzled from his company, and contributed to the stress that killed him. Those are facts, not opinions. The financial records prove it. My testimony is just context. The lawyer tried a few more angles, but Ellen objected to most of them. When Celine finally stepped down, her hands were shaking, but her voice had never wavered. Adrian was waiting in the hallway. He pulled her into a quiet corner, his hands cupping her face. You did well, he said. I wanted to scream at him. At her. At all of it. But you didn't. You stayed controlled, credible. That's what matters. He pressed his forehead to hers. It's almost over. The prosecution rested their case 3 days later. Miranda's defense was thin. She claimed she'd had permission to access the accounts, that Richard had wanted her to invest the money, that everything had been a misunderstanding. But the paper trail contradicted every claim. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted. Miranda's lawyer asked for time to prepare sentencing arguments. The judge set a date 4 weeks out and remanded Miranda to custody pending sentencing. As they led her away in handcuffs, Miranda turned and locked eyes with Celine. The hatred there was pure and absolute. But underneath it, Celine saw something else. Fear. The sudden understanding that she'd lost everything and there was no getting it back. Celine didn't look away. She met Miranda's stare with her own, unflinching, until the deputies pulled her through the door and she disappeared from sight. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Diana ran interference while Marcus cleared a path to the car. Someone shouted a question about whether Celine felt vindicated. She didn't answer. Vindication wasn't the right word. Justice was closer, but still not quite right. What she felt was free. The sentencing hearing was quieter. The prosecution recommended 20 years. Miranda's lawyer begged for leniency. His client was a mother, a widow, someone who'd made mistakes but deserved a second chance. The judge wasn't swayed. Mrs. Bennet, you systematically defrauded your late husband's estate, forged legal documents, and showed no remorse for your actions. You spent 2 years living off money you stole while your stepdaughter suffered. This court sees no reason for leniency. 22 years. With good behavior, she might see parole in 18. Miranda crumpled when she heard the sentence. She'd be 70 before she was free. Her life, as she'd known it, was over. Celine felt nothing watching her break down. No satisfaction, no triumph, no sadness. Just a sense of something heavy finally lifting off her shoulders. It's done, Adrian said quietly. It's done, Celine agreed. But there was one more piece to settle. The estate sale happened on a cold November morning. Everything Miranda and Celeste hadn't already sold was auctioned off to pay the court-ordered restitution. Furniture, artwork, dishes, clothes. Strangers walked through the rooms where Celine had grown up, picking through her family's history like it was a garage sale. Celine bought back 3 things. Her father's desk from his study, the one where he'd taught her about business and integrity. A photograph of her parents from before her mother died, both of them young and happy and unaware of what was coming. And her mother's wedding ring, which Miranda had tried to sell but couldn't get enough money for. Adrian arranged to have them delivered to the penthouse. When Celine opened the box containing her father's desk, she found something hidden in a secret drawer she'd forgotten existed. A letter, addressed to her in Richard's handwriting. Her hands shook as she opened it. My dearest Celine, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for so many things. I know I made a mistake marrying Miranda. I know I was lonely and foolish, and I let someone into our lives who didn't deserve to be there. By the time I understood what she was, it was too late. The damage was done. I tried to protect you. I tried to limit her access, to keep the business separate, to ensure you'd inherit what was rightfully yours. But I'm tired, and I'm afraid I haven't done enough. If things go wrong, if Miranda tries to take everything, fight back. You're stronger than you know. You have your mother's fire and my stubbornness, and that combination makes you unstoppable. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Build something beautiful from the ashes. Make me proud. I love you always, Dad. Celine read the letter 3 times before the tears came. When they did, they were the kind that shook her whole body, years of grief and rage and love finally finding release. Adrian found her on the floor of her suite, the letter clutched in her hand, crying like she hadn't cried since the funeral. He didn't say anything. He just sat beside her and held her until the storm passed. He knew, she said finally, her voice raw. He knew what she was, and he tried to stop her, and he couldn't. He did stop her, just not in the way he planned. Adrian brushed her hair back. He raised you to be strong enough to finish what he started. That's something. I miss him. I know. Celine pressed her face into Adrian's shoulder. I wish he could see what I've become. I wish I could tell him I fought back, that I won. He knows. Adrian's voice was certain. Wherever he is, he knows. And he's proud of you. The meeting with Margaret Chen happened 2 weeks later. Her office was in a building older than Adrian's tower, but just as impressive. Wood paneling, leather chairs, the kind of understated elegance that came from generations of wealth. Margaret was direct. I've been watching you since the gala. You handled Miranda's trial with grace. No interviews, no dramatics, just quiet dignity. That's rare. I didn't want to make a spectacle of it. Smart. The people who scream the loudest usually have the least to say. Margaret folded her hands on her desk. I'm on the board of the Hartwell Foundation. You received their gala invitation. We fund educational programs for disadvantaged youth, scholarships, mentorship, job training, the kind of work your father would have approved of. Celine's throat tightened. He would have. I want you to join the board. You're young, but you have something most of our members lack. Real experience with hardship. You know what it's like to have everything taken from you. That perspective is valuable. I don't know anything about running a foundation. You'll learn, and you'll bring fresh ideas. Too many of our board members are stuck in old ways of thinking. They want to throw money at problems without understanding what people actually need. Margaret's eyes were sharp. I think you understand what people need. The question is whether you're willing to do the work. Celine thought about her father's letter, about building something beautiful from the ashes. I'm willing, she said. Good. We meet monthly, first Tuesday. Diana has the details. Margaret stood, signaling the meeting was over. Then she paused. One more thing. Your stepmother's daughter, Celeste. What happened to her? Celine blinked at the subject change. She ran away before the wedding. She's been living with her boyfriend somewhere outside the city. Why? Because I'm curious whether you plan to help her or let her drown. The question hung in the air. Celine had been avoiding thinking about Celeste. The girl had texted a few times after the trial, apologizing again, asking if there was anything she could do. Celine hadn't responded. Part of her thought Celeste deserved to figure it out on her own. The other part remembered that Celeste was young and scared and had spent her whole life being shaped by Miranda's poison. I don't know yet, Celine admitted. Margaret nodded. That's an honest answer, but you should decide soon. People who drift without direction usually end up somewhere they don't want to be. After the meeting, Adrian was waiting in the car. How did it go? She offered me a seat on the foundation board. I said yes. Adrian smiled. Of course you did. And she asked about Celeste. His smile faded. What did you tell her? That I don't know what to do about her. Selena stared out the window. Part of me wants to help. Part of me thinks she needs to save herself. I can't figure out which part is right. Maybe both parts are right. Maybe you help, but only if she's willing to do the work. Adrian's hand found hers. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, but you can offer a hand to someone who's trying to climb out of the hole themselves. Celine thought about that. Then she pulled out her phone and typed a message to Celeste. If you're serious about changing, about being someone different than your mother, I can help, but I need to know you're committed. Are you? The response came 10 minutes later. Yes. I'm serious. I don't want to end up like her. Please. Celine showed the message to Adrian. What do you think? I think you're a better person than I am. I would have cut her loose months ago. That's because you're practical. I'm stubborn. Celine typed back. Meet me at the penthouse tomorrow. We'll talk. The next day, Celeste arrived looking nothing like the spoiled girl who'd lived in the estate. Her hair was darker, pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans and a sweater that had seen better days. When she saw Celine, her eyes filled with tears. Thank you for seeing me. Celine gestured to the couch. Sit. Tell me what you've been doing. Celeste sat on the edge of the cushion like she might bolt at any moment. Marcus got a job at a garage. I've been working at a coffee shop. It's not much, but it's honest work. And it's... She paused. It's the first time I've ever had to actually work for something. How does it feel? Terrible. Humbling? Kind of good, actually. Celeste twisted her hands together. I've been thinking a lot about everything. About Mom. About what she did. About how I just went along with it because it was easier than questioning her. You were young. I was old enough to know better. Old enough to see that what she was doing to you was wrong. Celeste's voice cracked. I'm so sorry, Celine, for all of it. For not standing up for you, for being cruel, for being useless. You deserved so much better. Celine studied her stepsister. The apology sounded real. The regret looked genuine. But words were easy. Actions were what mattered. What do you want from me? Celine asked. I don't know. Forgiveness, maybe? Or just a chance to prove I'm not her? That I can be better? Celeste met her eyes. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking anyway. Celine was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I'm on the board of a foundation that helps young people get education and job training. If you're serious about building a real life, I can get you into a program. Business management, accounting, something practical that you can build a career on. Celeste's eyes widened. You do that? After everything? I do it because everyone deserves a chance to be better than their worst moments. Even you. Celine's voice was firm. But if you waste this opportunity, if you fall back into old patterns, we're done. I'm offering you a hand up, not a free ride. Understand? I understand. Celeste was crying openly now. Thank you. I won't waste it. I promise. We'll see. After Celeste left, Adrian emerged from his office. You're gambling on her. I know. She might disappoint you. She might. Or she might actually change. Either way, I tried. That's more than anyone tried for me when I needed it. Celine leaned against him. Maybe that's the point. Breaking the cycle. Being the person I needed when I had no one. Adrian kissed the top of her head. You're going to change the world, aren't you? I'm going to try, one person at a time. 6 months later, Celine stood in front of the foundation board presenting her first major initiative, a program that paired young people from disadvantaged backgrounds with mentors in their chosen fields. Job shadowing, skill training, networking opportunities, the kind of comprehensive support that could actually change lives. Margaret Chen watched from the head of the table, her expression unreadable. When Celine finished, she asked a single question. How much will it cost? Celine had the numbers ready. $2 million in the first year, $3 million to sustain it long term. I've already identified corporate sponsors willing to contribute half that. The foundation would need to cover the rest. Another board member frowned. That's a significant investment. What's the expected return? You can't measure this kind of return in dollars, Celine said. But if we're talking outcomes, I expect at least 60% of participants to secure meaningful employment within 2 years. I expect 20% to pursue higher education. I expect every single one of them to have opportunities they wouldn't have had otherwise. And I expect some of them to come back and mentor the next generation. That's the return. people who become contributors instead of casualties. The board voted, 7 in favor, 2 against, 1 abstention. The program was approved. Walking out of the meeting, Margaret fell into step beside Celine. Well done. You've learned quickly. I had good teachers. You had the raw material already. We just helped you polish it. Margaret paused at the elevator. Your father would be proud. You're building exactly the kind of legacy he'd want. The words hit Celine harder than she'd expected. Thank you. That means more than you know. I know exactly how much it means. That's why I said it. Margaret smiled, a rare expression. Keep going. You're just getting started. That evening, Celine found Adrian on the penthouse terrace, looking out at the city. The skyline was lit up like a constellation, millions of lives playing out in those glowing windows. Your program got approved, he said without turning around. You already knew it would. I had faith in you. He glanced back. Though I'll admit, the way you handled Roberts, that was impressive. He's shot down every proposal for the last 5 years. Getting him to abstain instead of voting no is practically a miracle. I told him his grandson would benefit from the program. He's been struggling to find work after dropping out of college. Roberts didn't want to admit it publicly, but he wanted help. Celine joined Adrian at the railing. Everyone has a pressure point. You taught me that. I taught you a lot of things. You're starting to use them better than I do. I had a good teacher. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city breathe. Somewhere out there, Miranda was serving her sentence, learning what it felt like to have nothing. Somewhere out there, Celeste was attending classes and working at her coffee shop, trying to become someone different. And here, in this tower, Celine stood beside the man who'd given her a chance to rebuild her life from nothing. Do you ever regret it? Adrian asked. Marrying me, getting involved in all this, giving up the chance to just walk away and start fresh somewhere else? Celine thought about the question, about the girl she'd been and the woman she'd become, about everything she'd lost and everything she'd gained. No, she said. I don't regret any of it, even the hard parts, especially the hard parts. They made me who I am. And who are you? It was the same question he'd asked the night before their wedding. Then, she hadn't known how to answer. Now she did. I'm someone who survived, someone who fought back, someone who's building something that matters. She turned to face him. I'm the woman standing beside you, the woman running a foundation, the woman who learned to turn pain into power instead of letting it destroy her. That's who I am. Adrian's smile was slow and genuine. I love you, you know. It was the first time he'd said it. The first time either of them had said it. Celine's breath caught. I love you too. He pulled her close, and she fit against him like she'd been made for this, for him, for this life they were building together. What happens now? She asked. Now we keep going, keep building, keep taking care of each other and the people who depend on us. He kissed her forehead. Now we live the life we fought for. That night, lying in bed with Adrian asleep beside her, Celine pulled out her father's letter and read it one more time. Build something beautiful from the ashes. Make me proud. She'd done that. Was still doing it. Every day she woke up and chose to be someone who created instead of destroyed, who helped instead of hurt, who turned her anger into something useful instead of letting it poison her. That was the legacy her father had wanted, not money or power or revenge, though she'd claimed all three. The real legacy was becoming someone who made the world better than she'd found it. She folded the letter carefully and put it back in its drawer. Then she curled into Adrian's warmth and let herself feel something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. The foundation program launched 3 months later with 20 participants. Celine interviewed every single one of them personally. She heard stories that echoed her own, families that had fallen apart, parents who'd failed them, systems that had chewed them up and spit them out. And she saw in their eyes the same fire she'd carried through 2 years of hell, the determination to be more than their circumstances. We're going to work hard, she told them on the first day. This isn't charity, this is opportunity. What you do with it is up to you. But I'm here. My team is here. And we're invested in seeing you succeed. One girl, maybe 19, with wary eyes and defensive posture, raised her hand. Why? Why do you care what happens to us? Celine could have given a dozen polished answers. Instead, she gave the truth. Because someone gave me a chance when I had nothing. Someone saw potential in me when I couldn't see it in myself. And that changed everything. I'm paying it forward. That's all. 6 months into the program, 15 of the 20 participants were thriving. 3 had dropped out. 2 were struggling but still showing up. Celine considered that a victory. Celeste was one of the success stories. She'd completed her business certification and landed a junior position at one of Victoria's real estate firms. She called Celine once a week to report her progress, always anxious, always trying too hard to prove she was worthy of the second chance. "You don't have to prove anything to me," Celine told her during one of those calls. "Just prove it to yourself. Be the person you want to be, not the person you think I want you to be." "I'm trying," Celeste said. "It's harder than I thought, figuring out who I am when I'm not just mom's daughter or your stepsister, when I'm just me. That's the hardest work there is, but it's worth it." "Are we—" Celeste hesitated. "Are we okay? You and me?" Celine considered the question. They weren't close, probably never would be. Too much history, too many scars. But they weren't enemies anymore either. "We're okay," Celine said. "We're figuring it out. That's enough." A year after the wedding, Adrian threw a party. Not a gala, not a business event, just a celebration for the people who mattered. Victoria and James and Marcus and Diana. Margaret Chen, who'd become something like a friend. A few of the foundation board members. Celeste and Marcus, who'd gotten engaged and seemed genuinely happy. And Celine's program participants, the ones who'd stuck with it and were building real futures. Adrian stood at the center of the penthouse, glass raised. A toast to surviving, to fighting back, to building something that lasts. Everyone drank. Then Celine raised her own glass. "To second chances," she said, looking at Celeste. "To the people who see us when we're invisible." She looked at Adrian. "And to knowing that sometimes the best revenge is living well and refusing to let the people who hurt us define who we become." The applause was genuine, warm. These were people who understood that success wasn't about money or status or power, though they all had those things. Success was about becoming someone you could be proud of, someone who made choices based on who you wanted to be, not who you were running from. Later, when most of the guests had left, Celine found herself back on the terrace with Adrian. The city was still there, still glowing, still full of people struggling and surviving and occasionally thriving. "Happy?" Adrian asked. "Yes. Surprisingly, genuinely happy." Surprising. A year ago, I was scrubbing floors and thinking my life was over. Now I'm here, with you, running a foundation, making a difference. She shook her head. "It's more than I ever imagined." "You did this," Adrian said firmly. "I gave you an opportunity. You turned it into something real." "We did this. Together." Celine leaned against him. "I couldn't have done any of it alone." "Sure you could have. It would have taken longer and been harder, but you would have found a way. You're too stubborn not to." Celine laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." It is one. They stood there, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of broken lives and built something neither of them had expected. A partnership, a marriage, a future. "What's next?" Celine asked. "We've taken down Miranda, launched the foundation, established ourselves in society. What's the next challenge?" Adrian's smile was mysterious. "I have some ideas, but they can wait. For now, let's just enjoy this." This moment, this peace, this feeling that everything we fought for was worth it. He turned to face her fully. "We've spent a year fighting battles. Maybe it's time to just live." Celine thought about that, about the letter from her father telling her to build something beautiful, about Margaret Chen saying she was just getting started, about the 20 young people who were counting on her to show them that change was possible. "I don't think I know how to just live anymore," she admitted. "I'm always thinking 3 steps ahead, planning the next move, anticipating the next threat." "Then I'll teach you." Adrian's hands cupped her face. "We'll teach each other. How to enjoy what we've built. How to be happy instead of just surviving." "Okay," Celine whispered. "Teach me." He kissed her, slow and deep and full of promise. And for the first time in years, maybe the first time ever, Celine let herself stop planning and just feel. The warmth of his hands, the taste of champagne on his lips, the solid reality of a life she'd fought for and won. When they pulled apart, she was smiling. "What?" Adrian asked. I was just thinking. Miranda thought destroying me would be easy. She thought I was weak and broken, and she could just sweep me aside like I was nothing. Celine looked out at the city. I wonder if she knows yet that trying to break me was the worst mistake she ever made, that I'm still here, still standing, while she's locked away. I wonder if she understands that she didn't destroy me. She made me stronger. She understands, Adrian said quietly. I made sure of it. Celine turned to him. What did you do? I sent her a newspaper clipping about your foundation program, about you being appointed to the board, about everything you've accomplished. His smile was cold. I wanted her to see exactly what she threw away when she decided you were disposable. For a moment, Celine didn't know how to feel about that. Then she laughed, real, genuine laughter that came from somewhere deep. That's cruel, she said. Yes, I love it. I thought you might. They went back inside, back to the party that was winding down, back to the life they'd built together, from nothing but determination and mutual respect, and the understanding that sometimes the best way to heal from trauma is to transform it into purpose. Celeste caught Celine before she left. Thank you, for tonight, for everything, for not giving up on me. I didn't do it for you, Celine said honestly. I did it because that's who I want to be, someone who helps when she can. But you did the work, Celeste. You chose to change. That's all you. Celeste hugged her, awkward and uncertain, but real. I'm going to keep choosing it every day. Good. That's all any of us can do. After everyone left, Celine and Adrian stood in the quiet penthouse, surrounded by the remnants of celebration. Empty glasses, scattered napkins, the warm feeling of people who'd cared enough to show up. This is what winning looks like, Adrian said. Not crushing your enemies, though we did that too. This, community, purpose, people who matter to you and who you matter to. When did you become a philosopher? Celine teased. When I married someone who made me want to be better than I was. He pulled her close. You've changed me, you know. Made me think about legacy differently, about what I'm building and why. Good. You've changed me too. Made me braver, sharper, more willing to fight for what I deserve. They swayed together in the silence, no music, just the rhythm of two hearts beating in sync. I love this life, Celine said quietly. I love who I am in it, who we are together. So do I. Then let's keep building it. Let's make it so beautiful and so strong that nothing can tear it down. Deal. That night, Celine dreamed about her father. They were in his study, the one from before everything went wrong. He was teaching her about compound interest, about building wealth slowly and ethically. In the dream, she told him everything. About Miranda's betrayal, about the trial, about Adrian and the foundation and the life she'd built. He smiled at her, pride shining in his eyes. You did good, sweetheart. Better than I could have imagined. I miss you, she said. I know. But you're okay now. Better than okay. You're exactly where you need to be, doing exactly what you're meant to do. He touched her face gently. I'm so proud of you. Not because you got revenge or married well or became successful. I'm proud because you stayed kind despite everything. Because you chose to help others instead of becoming bitter. Because you're building something that matters. I learned that from you, and you made it your own. That's the best legacy a parent can hope for, a child who takes what they were given and makes it better. He kissed her forehead. Keep going. You're doing beautifully. She woke with tears on her face and a sense of peace she'd been chasing for years. Adrian was still asleep beside her, one arm thrown across her waist. She traced the line of his jaw with her finger, marveling at how far they'd come. From a transaction to a partnership to something that looked a lot like love. Maybe it was love. Maybe it had been all along, hiding under layers of strategy and survival and the mutual understanding that they were both too broken to expect fairy tales. But this was better than a fairy tale. This was real, hard-won and complicated and imperfect, and it was theirs. The foundation grew. By the second year, they'd expanded to serve 50 participants. By the third year, 100. Celine hired staff, developed partnerships with businesses willing to provide internships, created scholarship funds for participants who wanted to pursue higher education. She worked 80-hour weeks and loved every minute of it. Adrian's empire expanded too, though his methods became more subtle. Less brute force, more strategic positioning. Celine's influence there too. She'd taught him that you could be powerful without being destructive, that building something lasting required thinking beyond the next quarter or the next deal. They became the kind of couple people whispered about at parties. The crime king who'd reformed his image and the woman who'd transformed him. It wasn't true, of course. Adrian was still dangerous, still willing to crush anyone who threatened what was his, and Celine was still learning to wield her own kind of power, the kind that came from knowing exactly who you were and refusing to apologize for it. But the whispers didn't matter. What mattered was the life they'd built, the people they'd helped, the legacy they were creating together. 5 years after the wedding, Celine stood at her father's grave for the first time since the funeral. She'd been avoiding it, unable to face the finality of that headstone. But today felt right. She knelt and placed fresh flowers on the grave. "Hi, Dad. I know it's been a while. I've been busy." The wind rustled through the trees. Somewhere, a bird sang. "Miranda's still in prison. She'll be there for a long time. Celeste turned out okay. You'd be surprised. She's working hard, making something of herself, and me?" Celine smiled through tears. "I'm doing what you told me to do. Building something beautiful from the ashes, making you proud." She told him about the foundation, about the lives they'd changed, about Adrian, about falling in love with someone unexpected, about learning that strength wasn't about never falling down, it was about getting back up, over and over, until you finally found solid ground. "I wish you could see it all," she said, "but I think maybe you can. I think maybe you're proud of me. I hope you are." She stayed there for an hour, talking to her father the way she used to when he was alive, about everything and nothing, about the future she was building and the past she'd survived. When she finally stood to leave, she felt lighter. Adrian was waiting by the car, giving her space but staying close enough that she knew he was there if she needed him. When she reached him, he pulled her into his arms. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, I'm okay. Better than okay." She looked back at the grave. "I said goodbye. Finally let go of the anger and the grief and all of it. I think he'd want me to. I think he would too." They drove back to the city in comfortable silence. When they pulled up to the tower, Celine looked up at the building that had become home. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't met?" she asked. "Sometimes. I think I'd still be sitting in that wheelchair, playing games, winning every battle but losing the war." Adrian's hand found hers. "And you'd probably still be fighting to survive. We needed each other. Still do." "Yeah, we do." They rode the elevator up together, hand in hand, two people who'd started as strangers and become something more. Partners, allies, lovers, family. The penthouse was quiet when they entered. Celine kicked off her shoes and collapsed onto the couch. Adrian joined her, pulling her against his side. "What do you want for dinner?" he asked. "Something simple. I don't want to think tonight. I just want to be." "Then that's what we'll do." And they did. They ordered takeout and ate it on the couch, watching a movie neither of them paid attention to. They talked about nothing important, work gossip, foundation drama, Victoria's latest scheme. They laughed at stupid jokes and argued about whether the movie was any good, and existed in the kind of comfortable domesticity that neither of them had expected to find. Later, lying in bed with the city lights painting patterns on the ceiling, Celine finally put words to the things she'd been feeling for months. "I'm happy," she said. "Genuinely, completely happy. For the first time since my father died, I'm not just surviving or fighting or planning the next move. I'm just happy." Adrian turned to look at her. "Good. You deserve to be." "So do you." "I am. You make me happy. This life makes me happy." He kissed her softly. "Thank you for saying yes, for taking a chance on me when you had every reason to run. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible, for giving me a reason to fight." They fell asleep tangled together, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage and built something beautiful. And somewhere in a prison cell, Miranda lay awake, probably still cursing the day she'd underestimated the girl she'd tried to break. Probably still regretting every cruel word, every slap, every moment she'd chosen cruelty over kindness. But Celine didn't think about her anymore. Miranda was the past. A chapter closed, a lesson learned. The future was what mattered now. The foundation was expanding into new cities. The program graduates were starting to mentor the next generation. Celeste was thriving, Adrian was planning new ventures, and Celine was exactly where she was meant to be, building a legacy worth leaving. Because that was the thing about revenge. The best kind wasn't destruction, it was transformation. It was taking everything someone tried to use against you and turning it into fuel. It was becoming so successful, so powerful, so undeniably present that they had to live with the knowledge of what they'd lost when they thought you were nothing. Miranda had thought she was destroying Celine. Instead, she'd created a queen, and that queen was just getting started.